91. Chapter 91. Direction. The Ripper. Damn, kid. Victor Vector whistled as he was led through a large concrete factory. You sure don't aim small, I'll tell you that. You can say that again. Jackie Wells chuckled from his right. Hearing you talk about your plans was one thing, but this, it actually feels real. The two of them had been doing some boxing practice when the call came, and the ex-Valentino Merc would have probably sold his favorite guns before even thinking about missing something of this magnitude. Michael, his real face hidden behind high-grade real skin and dressed in a sharp corporate suit instead of his usual kit, smiled widely. I told you both that if I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to do it right. He waved for them to follow him deeper in, but as Jackie said, seeing is believing. And they avoided the construction workers as they were shown multiple large halls, most of them empty, but some still having rusted bits of vehicle machinery left over, before he led them into a large warehouse that would only need some safety work done before being fully usable. Jackie kept poking fun and making quips along the way, while failing to hide his amazement from Vic's practiced eye, while Vic himself contented himself with listening to Mike's explanations about the intended purpose of each room. Assembly lines, laboratories, forges. The kid had definitely planned the whole operation out down to the tiniest minute detail. It was impressive, was the long and short of Vic's opinion. Before long, they found themselves walking onto the warehouse roof, right next to an AV landing pad positioned next to an industrial-scale elevator. So, Victor spoke up as they all faced the far more precarious office/residential building. You've got the layout pretty much nailed down, but the real question is how many folks do you plan on employing in the long run, and where do you plan on finding them? The infrastructure was usually the easy part of running a biz, even if it was by far the more expensive one. Michael didn't seem all that concerned about the latter question and shrugged. The less skilled labor will still be the majority, even with the fine work we will be doing, and most of those I can easily find all over the city and train up as necessary. As for the skilled workers, he frowned slightly. I'll try to recruit as many of them as I can the usual way, but something tells me most of those will have to come through contacts and the like. I could always ask around Haywood. Jackie said honestly, never know if there is someone looking for a fresh chance. I'd appreciate that, Jack. Mike smiled, even if I'll have to vet them myself. Jackie waved it off with a small chuckle. Obviously, I may be able to charm my way into the hearts of anyone, but snooping around their closets I'll leave to you. Both Vic and Mike gave him looks of deep skepticism, but he simply let their doubt flow over him like so much air. Moving on. Mike shook his head with amusement. The biggest problem is going to be finding the right people for a security force. Trying to get your corpo soldiers already, eh? Jackie only half teased. Unfortunate as the necessity is, Mike shrugged. It is very much a necessity. Not having a protection detail will make me look weak and just invite the other corporate goons to shoot my place up at the first opportunity. Jackie's jovial expression twisted into a frown. Fucking rats, man. Vic spoke up. I've got a good number of veterans down on their luck on my patient list. I could point them your way if you don't mind replacing their civilian cyberware with something a bit heavier. Even as he said it, he already knew the answer. Not a problem. Mike took less than a moment to answer. Experienced people are always welcome, and it helps they'll feel at least a bit motivated to protect their new chance. Vic merely nodded at that, having expected it, but Jackie shook his head. Cold chum. True but cold. A bit cynical, I agree. Mike's expression became wry, but it isn't like I'm going to offer them a bad deal, so I'm not all that hung up about it. He looked at Jackie. Sure you don't feel like a change in career? The merc chuckled and shook his head. Nah, chum, I'm good where I am. Expected as much, but I thought I should still ask. Mike shrugged before turning to the other Ripper present. As for the other part of your question, Vic, I plan on hiring a nice round 1,500 to begin with. Should cover both the factory and warehouse for 3 full shifts. We'll have to outsource the accountants for a while at first, but that should solve itself in time as well. That is a lot of people, Mike, Vic said after an astonished blink. You sure you can support those kinds of numbers when you are just starting out? I've got enough savings to keep myself afloat for a few months, not counting any further earnings. The kid assured, And even if that fails, I am owed enough favors by my contacts to tide me over in the worst case. Victor felt relieved, but still felt like he had to say it. You feel confident, and that is good. But? Mike raised an eyebrow. But? Vic nodded. How can you be sure you aren't going to fail? You are risking a lot here, Mike. Maybe too much. The cyborg didn't answer immediately, eyes trailing off to the damaged residential tower for a long while before he spoke. Skepticism is good, healthy. Keeps us from rushing into foolish decisions without due consideration. He turned back to the duo. It's true, I may fail. I might miscalculate and fail to turn a profit, or maybe some rival has enough pull to ruin my rep and my business. Hell, I may even piss the competition off enough and get hit with one death squad too many. His face turned hard and his eyes flashed with determination, but I refuse to let fear and hesitation stop me from reaching for greatness when I know what I'm capable of, what I can create. He paused. I'm no altruist, not really, but even then, to continue wallowing in obscurity would mean leaving thousands of others to do the same. Thousands whom I could help in my own way. He looked away, his expression turning wistful. And is that not something worth risking almost everything for? Jackie had turned deathly still, staring at Mike's back, with a complicated look in his eyes. But Vic merely walked over and patted the much taller cyborg's shoulder with pride. And that's all I needed to hear. Always the straight man, huh, Vic? Mike chuckled. The older Ripper merely smiled. But there is one question that still needs answering. The cyborg looked down at him and pointed a thumb at the bottom of the residential tower. There is a clinic with your name on it waiting down there. You plan on keeping your end of the deal, Vic? Victor felt a flash of hesitation, but it only lasted for a split second after what he'd heard earlier. He snorted and shook his head. Like you even need to ask. The noodle seller. Here you go, boys. Old Chew smiled crookedly as he laid the order out on the counter. 4 house specials with a discount for our brave peacekeepers. Esteban rolled his eyes. If you are going to make me listen to your quips every single time, just take the full price, you old fart. Don't listen to him, Chew. Another one of the watchmen quickly interjected, You can talk as much shit as you want. Esteban glared at him, but the man just shrugged. Hey, free eddies is free eddies. Ah, Dragon, you are a man after my own heart. Chew chuckled. A third neighborhood watchman leaned in, voice low. Hey, you lot heard the rumor. What rumor? Esteban raised an eyebrow. Word is the doc is scaling up. The man stage whispered. My grandmama overheard him talking to his assistant. Seems to be he is going to start looking to employ a lot of folk soon. The fourth watchman, or woman as was the case, whistled. You sure you aren't talking out of your ass, Jake? The man shrugged cluelessly. Could be bullshit. That's just what she told me. The noodle maker's chuckle, one that was just a touch louder than it strictly needed to be, made the 4 startle and look back at him with different levels if irritation. But he simply ignored that as he pulled out a small pamphlet. Come closer, children, and let old Chew enlighten you. What is it? Esteban asked with a frown, only for Chew to unceremoniously slap the pamphlet in front of him. The watchman went to voice his irritation, but something on the paper stopped him, and in seconds he had grabbed it and was scanning each and every word he saw. Finally, after rereading the thing 5 times, he looked up at the cook with narrowed eyes. Where did you get this? The doc. The cook enunciated with playful mockery. Came by yesterday. I was happy to serve him my best, as usual, of course, but then he went and started asking around the most interesting questions. Oh, just spit it out. Jake groaned. Patience. Chew tutted. My old heart can only take so much youthful exuberance. Do you even know what that word means, you old fart? Mira, the sole woman among them, muttered, but went heard by everyone. Chew merely grinned at her, making her sigh. Right, please enlighten us, O driest of raisins. Chew snorted and leaned back in. Anyway, Doc started asking me about how much people earned, how much they paid for insurance, that kind of thing. Couldn't he just find that kind of thing out from the net? Dragon asked, confused. Wanted to find out directly. Chew shrugged. Probably smart of him, but that isn't the most interesting bit. No. Esteban agreed and pushed the pamphlet to the rest of them. This is. The other three very nearly got into a tugging match to see who could read first, but under Esteban's glare, all silently agreed to share like actual adults. Jake whistled, and Mira's eyes turned unfocused. Dragon shot Chu a suspicious look. "You aren't bullshitting us, are you?" "While I do enjoy screwing with you youngsters." Chu began to much silent outrage. "That's way too much effort for a joke." "Seriously?" Dragon still seemed skeptical, eyes trailing back to the pamphlet. 5,000 a month with in-house healthcare, and that's just for warehouse work. Sounds too good to be true. "Oh, but it gets better," Chu chuckled. "He's also looking for security." The four of them immediately perked up, but Esteban turned skeptical. "Wait, if all of this is true, then that means Doc will probably be moving somewhere else sooner rather than later. You couldn't stay on a lower mega-building floor at that level of wealth. That was just asking for problems." "But you seem too calm about it." Chu smirked. But of course the good Doc just couldn't get enough of old Chu's traditional Chinese cuisine. All four of them groaned with disturbing synchronicity, so he offered me a spot to set up shop in his new place. "We are going to need details," Esteban said after a moment. "Copious." Dragan added, "Details." And being a gracious host, Chu was happy to provide. Michael Magos Sobronov. Experts from Netwatch have confirmed traces of AI activity in the Zurich terrorist attack, but have so far been unable to track those responsible down. The Assistant Executive Officer of Netwatch assures the public that those responsible will be tracked down and the danger will be removed. In other news, following the Zurich crisis, the Swiss Federal Assembly has proposed a new and comprehensive cybersecurity bill to counter any potential future rogue attacks. Signs indicate that the rest of the EEC is going to follow in their example, so that an atrocity like this one would never happen again. The reporter went to do the usual outro, but I just shut the TV. "Well," I muttered, "at least they aren't claiming it was maintenance malfunction anymore." Yes, the excuse was poorly chosen. "Sorry, buddy, but you are probably going to need to change your icon up and as much of your signature as you can." "It is tedium but necessary. I am unbothered." "Good," I exhaled. "We got too close to being discovered this time. We improve daily. They will fail." "Indeed," I chuckled. A moment later, I heard Becca calling from the other end of the room. "Hey, Mike." "What? You gonna keep staring at thing for hours or something?" she asked teasingly. "Come on, Mary is on too." Because of course the two would hit it off instantly. Chuckling darkly, I stood up and moved to join their online game. This should be amusing. "Oh, you've got to be shitting me." Mary's enraged screech was like a delectable meal for the soul. "You are cheating, admit it." "Cope," I generously proclaimed, and then headshotted her across the map, through a wall. For the third time, an incoherent bellow of rage came from the other end of the call, followed immediately by the telltale sound of a controller hitting the wall. I opened my mouth to keep fucking with her, but a flash on the screen stopped me as I saw my character explode. My withering glare was completely ineffectual against my co-player, as Rebecca merely stuck her tongue out at me before exploding me again. I hummed, "Yes, this game sucks." Rebecca laughed her ass off. "Serves you right, asshole." Mary grumbled from the other end. "Well, at least I'm not as bad as you are," I said. But before we could get back into it, I heard a familiar ringtone and stood up. "Sorry, I've got to take this." Mary immediately redirected her complaining at Becca. "So," I spoke aloud as I stepped out onto my balcony, "how can I help Arasaka NC's newest counterintelligence director?" There was a long pause before the answer came. You know I can't just ignore shit like that." "Ah, I see. Your new position's already gotten to your head." I nodded sagely. "It's been a day," she hisses. "Exactly." "Yeah, you know what? Fuck you. I don't even care anymore." "And thus you are freed." A snort escaped her at that. "Right. Stop distracting me, you gonk. It's time." "Which is exactly why I'd been distracting you." I sighed internally and voiced a simple, concerned, "Ah." She gave me a sympathetic look over the hollow, but then turned serious. "Arasaka-sama invites you to his personal penthouse in Konpeki Plaza tomorrow at 7 p.m. You may come armed, but please dress appropriately for the occasion." "Right," I exhaled. Thanks for that, V. I'll be there too. She looked away. I don't think you need to worry too much, but stay on your guard anyway. I couldn't help but snort, like I had any other option. 92. Chapter 92. Konpeki Talks. Michael Margos, Sobranov. The drive to Konpeki Plaza was a mess of quiet tension, leaving my fingers biting into the steering wheel and teeth clenched so hard I could just about hear the groaning of metal, which was a considerable contrast to my departure, upon which I felt nothing but exasperation as I was nearly smothered by my worried mother to the point it all started feeling more ridiculous than threatening. For a while at least. Being left to stew in my thoughts, with Logos being busy creating an absolute abomination of a virus in case we needed to try and escape, let the gravity of the situation slowly settle back on my shoulders. Thankfully, my thoughts were interrupted when I turned a corner and saw a bunch of Maelstrom members surrounding a pair of their bulky cyborgs, cheering as they beat the ever-loving fuck out of each other. And why did one of the two look vaguely familiar? By then I'd already passed them by, and the distraction was enough to bring me back into focus, and I did my best to center myself as I approached the walled Arasaka compound, now dominating a good 5% of Watson. The fact it was left mostly as warehouse space seemed a bit overkill at first, but knowing their NC branch was their largest presence in the Western Hemisphere, it made sense. They needed the logistic support if they wanted to keep their competition with Militech going to any real degree. And it just so happened that particular 7-decade-long dick measuring contest left my home acting as a permanent front line between the two, a state that had already resulted in a nuking and an invasion attempt just for the sake of more profit and a larger cut of the business pie, or worse, for petty pride. And this was the sort of people that now had their eyes on me. I suppose I was fortunate my relative anonymity lasted this long to begin with. The gate guards at the compound were understandably tense when I drove up, as I made it a point to arrive in my guise of Magos, and not Michael, in full armor and fully armed. As if that would make any real difference, I groused despite myself as I transferred my codes and waited for them to check their list. Still, it gave me the illusion of confidence, and that just might be enough. The guards waved me through, and soon enough I'd left my van in the trembling hands of a thoroughly confused valet and approached the entrance of NC's newest luxury attraction. Not that the situation was in any way different when the poor guy tasked with scanning guests for weapons saw me approach, or the ridiculously chromed-out woman standing at the reception desk. How they thought replacing their workers' faces with bright golden chrome was anything other than utterly fucking garish I will never understand. My utmost apologies, honored guest. The woman did a good job at hiding the tremble in her voice. Please insert your neural link into the scanner while I call on my supervisors to make sure everything is in order. Like I told your valet, Mr. Arasaka is expecting me. I repeated but followed her instruction. Generating false data. She offered a practiced patient smile at that, having probably heard that a million times in the last few days, but I still caught the slight widening of her eyes as she got confirmation from whoever she was calling. Barely even glancing at the scan results, she quickly spoke up. Please, go on ahead, honored guest. We apologize for making you wait. Right. I resisted the urge to inform her it was no big deal and stepped around the reception desk and deeper into the plaza. And I had to say, even with my thoughts being a mess, the place still managed to look truly impressive. Unlike their staff, the decor was actually tasteful. The construction was sleek and the coloring pleasant to the eye, and the well-dispersed pots of plant life were rather satisfying to my odd new appreciation for greenery. The elevator dinged as I reached the top floor, and I took a short breath before stepping out, coming out into a thoroughly luxurious, mostly glass penthouse where a trio of familiar figures were waiting. Valerie looked like she'd taken a hit of the good stuff and was barely containing it. Her eyes were focused, and her poise was one of someone thoroughly in their element as she stood next to and slightly behind the seated corporate heir. Speaking of whom, Yorinobu Arasaka had obviously seen better days. There were slight bags under his eyes, and his lower legs had yet to be replaced, but he didn't seem particularly troubled by that state of affairs. He probably already had the best chrome money could buy slated for installation when he flew back to Japan. And last, but certainly not least, was the not-so-proverbial elephant in the room looming over all of us. Adam Smasher's eyes were laser-focused on me from the moment I stepped out from the lift, and probably a long-ass time before that as well. His heavily modified dragoon frame, initially coiled to react to anything, shifted minutely in a way that seemed almost amused when he saw me arrive covered in a small armory. Which, yeah, that's fair enough. I noticed Valerie's right eye twitch slightly as she observed the same, but notably neither of them openly commented on it. I quickly put it out of my mind, and from that moment I was solely focused on my host. Mr. Asaka. I nodded as I approached, my tone respectful but not deferential. Mr. Margos. Yorinobu nodded back, completely unperturbed. Or is it Mr. Sobranov? Margos will do for now, I answered without skipping a beat, and was immediately rewarded for it with a disgusted cybernetic rumble. Fucking alter egos? Really? What are you, 15? Suppressing the wave of terror I felt at his attention, I made it a point to keep my eyes focused solely on Arasaka, quickly earning a mild grunt of disinterest from the death machine when said corpo shot Smasher a look. Please, Yorinobu said as he looked back at me. Take a seat and we may begin. I went to sit across him but hesitated for all of a split second, which was more than enough. It's rated for me. Sit your ass down. And sat it down I did. First, Yorinobu began, allow me to thank you for both saving my life and protecting us from the Netrunner attack that followed. My security details reports were understandably terse when describing your contribution, but the scale of your aid is unmistakable. It will not be forgotten. Bunch of pussies tried shifting blame. One meat stain even tried to take credit. Smasher rumbled with audible disgust. Had to paint the wall with two before they found their spines. Yes, Arasaka's voice turned clipped. Thank you for that reminder, Smasher. I'd almost forgotten that particular scene. Smasher grunted, net bullshit is for cowards, but lying is for worms. Smasher, V cut in, enough. We are here for a reason. You can get back to creaming your chair in a bit, brat. The mountain of metal rumbled, causing her to scowl. Deciding I was not going to step anywhere near whatever that was, I spoke up. While I am appreciative of the praise, something tells me that is not the only reason behind you calling me here. That is only partially true. Arasaka inclined his head, having completely ignored the back and forth going on around him. I can understand why someone of your background would doubt my sincerity in this, but make no mistake. I owe you a debt, and it will be repaid. Despite knowing it might be taken as offensive, I failed to contain a slow, baffled blink before my brain rebooted, understood. But before we get to that, he moved on. It is my understanding that you are a man of discretion, or at least so Ms. Price claims. Mentally frowning at the implication, I leaned in slightly, remaining silent for a few moments before deciding that honesty here was the best option. So long as we aren't out for each other's blood, anything said here I will take to the grave. V's shoulders tensed slightly, but Yorinobu's answer made her relax almost as quickly. Good enough for now, he said with a nod and began his spiel. This is no true secret, but it will not be announced for a while yet. My father, specifically through my sister, who is the current CEO of the company, plans to place me in direct control over Arasaka NC. That could mean a lot of different things. Whether those things are good or bad, well, only time could tell. I thought, but said nothing, and seeing me remain silent, Yorinobu went on, doing this properly will of course demand that I establish contacts throughout the city that are mine alone. Ones that I can trust to act in mutual interest without having to fear a knife to the back. Ms. Price claims you more than fit that bill. V straightened her back. That is certainly a way to interpret the breadth of my influence, I said slowly. Finally, Yorinobu's relaxed expression changed as his lip twitched slightly upwards. There is no need to be humble, Mr. Margos. He gave V a sideways glance. Remind us, Ms. Price, if you please. She shot me an apologetic look that passed so quickly it might as well have been a trick of the light, and began listing close ties to the Tiger Claws, working relationship with every single big-name fixer, notably so with Rogue and Regina Jones, network of favors and contacts relating to clandestine medical and cybernetic work, and as of 2 days ago, an official business endorsement from the Vice Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Price. Yorinobu hummed and waved his open hand, as if to say, see? As you can see, Mr. Magos, you may dispense with the subterfuge. It is an understandable attempt, but also a complete waste of both of our times. Grateful for the lack of facial muscle that could display my mental scowl, I let out a grunt. Very well. What exactly did you want, and what do I get out of it? And we finally reach the meat of it, he said, taking a short sip of his water before continuing. I am looking for someone to assist me with clandestine work concerning issues of the intra-company variety. Someone capable of acting undetected or through disposable proxies that can help me in dismantling the less than acceptable cliques operating under my family's aegis. And supplanting them with your own cronies, no doubt. A number of names were considered for this, but Ms. Price was rather insistent you would be the best option. He gesticulated in her vague direction as he spoke. And it helps that I am already in your debt, 2 birds with 1 stone, as the saying goes. Also helps that you have every ability to simply crush everything I have if I disagree. I muttered despite myself. His eyes flashed with irritation, but bafflingly it didn't seem to be at all directed at me. Again, I understand your skepticism, but I am not so callous to repay a favor with blood. But, he paused briefly, giving me a knowing look. It is true that active cooperation between us ensures whatever it is you suspect doesn't happen, for an appreciable period at the very least. Taking in a needle's breath, I nodded. You are right. I apologize for that outburst. He merely nodded. So, I said after a moment, you want me to act as what? Your personal fixer in the city? He tilted his head a bit at that. Of a sort. I would provide you with tasks and leave you to accomplish them however you see fit, with an emphasis on subtlety. Your methods do not matter so long as they ensure the local branch of the company is made compliant with my goals. Dare I ask what those goals are? I prompted slowly. Stability and productivity. Might as well have told me to fuck right off. I groused. Right. And what do I get out of it? I was informed you prefer to keep things simple, and so allow me to do the same. Every job I request through my new head of counterintelligence, I will pay you a fair but premium price on a case-to-case basis. So her promotion really was an Arasaka, the family whim. Good to know. I was mostly satisfied with that, but not satisfied enough to just follow along, and so I asked, and if I need you to put your weight behind me instead of the money? Yorinobu shook his head. Unfortunately, that would be revealing our connection to far too many eyes, and would defeat the purpose of our agreement. Just about ready to agree, I had a thought aggressively shove itself to the forefront of my mind, quickly identifying the source to be the still completely silent Logos. But what if we could obscure it? You have something in mind? Arasaka sounded vaguely intrigued. The favor you owe me. I began slowly, having to consciously keep myself from rubbing my hands. Why not make it a business contract between my new company and Arasaka NC? A large order of cyberware done as a favor and leaked to appear exactly as just that would explain away any connection between us, imagined or otherwise. And help you launch your business. He rubbed his chin briefly, notably not dismissing it out of hand. It is acceptable in principle, even if the execution would be more complex, and I am eager to repay you properly. What exactly are you offering? Instead of answering, I procured a blank chip and quickly inserted it into my Neurport, uploading a string of data before placing it on the table between us. Smasher, Arasaka called. The mountain of chrome reached over, picking the chip up with surprisingly delicate precision and inserting it into his own port. He must have noticed my brief surprise because he immediately snorted, "Net fuckery is for cowards, and no damn coward is getting through my black ice." Just from the passive feeling he gave off, all I could say to that was, fair enough. So? Yorinobu asked after 20 or so quiet seconds. Smasher grunted and ejected the chip. Solid designs, good price, good performance, easy maintenance. Too bad it's all civvy shit. I don't do mass-produced military grade, I said, doing my best to hide my surprise at the fact he could actually understand it enough to comment. It made sense, but the image just didn't fit for some reason. "Your design's a good, kid," Smasher glared down at me, "but if you aren't a Lloyd the fuck up the next time I see you, I am scrapping you on principle. This isn't amateur hour anymore." "Duly noted," I ground out. "Kindly do not intimidate my new business associates, Smasher-san," Yorinobu ordered, and his wording was hard to miss. "So you accept?" "With Smasher-san's approval, ignoring your offer would be foolish, but my acceptance depends entirely on you." He informed me, "As I said before, I do not plan on repaying my debt to you by forcing you into an alliance. I am content with you using up your favor on making this deal and walking out, so long as you keep our discussion to yourself." That was almost suspiciously generous. "Or we can work together." He offered his hand and support each other's rise. I looked down at the offered hand, my Kerenzikov snapping into action to give me more time to consider it. There was obviously a lot he wasn't telling me, and all of this could simply be an attempt to tempt me before ultimately getting rid of me, once I was no longer useful to his plans. But at the same time, I couldn't completely discount the idea he was being sincere with his offer. Even if it would give me no assurance, someone else in Arasaka wouldn't try to poke me without his protection. Most important, however, was the fact the deal would offer me the chance to build myself up in relative safety, emphasis on the relative, from the other core, allowing me to build up a power base and survive on my own when the deal ultimately fell through. The real question in the end was temporary safety and support worth the risk of openly working with Arasaka? Less than an objective second passed before I shook the hand and took my first true step in the corporate world. 93, Chapter 93, Debrief. Michael Magos Sobranov. After the abrupt negotiations were concluded, Arasaka made no attempts at small talk. "Apologies for being a poor host, but my doctors demand I keep to a tight rest schedule." "Of course." I nodded and stood up. "I wish you a swift recovery." The corporate heir inclined his head, more from practiced politeness than actual gratitude. "Ms. Price, please escort our guest downstairs. I trust you have much to discuss." For a flash, V almost seemed surprised at the order, but took it in stride. "Yes, sir." As we were about to make our way to the elevator, I was treated to that rather ridiculous scene of Adam fucking Smasher pushing the wheelchair-bound corporate heir towards his bedroom. All the while he glared both of us down, daring us to say a word. Content with remaining ineligible for the Darwin Award for a while yet, neither of us made a peep. "Oh, and kid," Smasher's voice ground from the other room, "I want one of those chainsaw swords. Make it a big one." Pausing at the elevator, I half turned back. "It is going to cost you." "Worrying about money is for meat. Just get it done. And no fucking gimmicks." "Whatever," I said, and not waiting for a response, stepped into the elevator with V. The moment the doors shut, she let out a deep exhale. Fuck, that was tense. "Right." I deadpanned, real tense, standing there while I was one poorly phrased argument away from getting smashed. I finished with air quotes, "Seriously, V, what the hell was that?" She shook her head, "Not here." Forcing the impulse to demand answers down, I ground out, "If not here, where?" "Lizzie's?" she asked tentatively. "Your boss going to just let you leave after that?" I blinked. He wasn't bullshitting about needing the rest. She shrugged. "And the less time I spend around Smasher, the better. That fucker is terrifying." "I don't know, V." I crossed my arms, allowing just a bit of teasing to enter my tone, if only to be petty. "He seemed pretty all right with you now that I think about it." "Yeah." Her eyes turned dead. "Apparently I have more balls than most of the men in Arasaka. His words, not mine, which just means he keeps butting in whenever I'm nearby. Probably finds it funny he almost triggers my fight or flight by just standing there. Still makes it worth shooting your previous boss in the face, right?" She was just about to nod before her face twisted in annoyance. "You really need to stop doing that shit, Em. I get knowing about my promotion, but that too. Finding out was way easier than you think." I chuckled. There was so much chatter going on about what happened, some of it even spilled into the public servers. "You have all the subtlety of a brick, V." She groaned. "Yeah, I might have rushed things. A bit." "Jenkins really that much of an asshole?" Like you wouldn't believe. A look of pure satisfaction spread across her face. Our chat was paused there as the elevator reached the ground floor and we quickly left the building, a silence settling between us as I drove us over to Lizzie's while typing out a few messages to ensure there would be no misunderstandings like last time. Being regulars, we were waved in by the Moxes and quickly made our way to a booth where we wouldn't be easily disturbed. Ordering our drinks, we let each other enjoy the atmosphere for a short while, just letting the tension of before bleed off of us before I finally decided it had been enough and spoke up. So, I spoke up in a low tone. What exactly prompted you to throw me to the wolves like this? She cringed into her raised glass. I wouldn't? I cut her off. I could have simply been a curiosity, someone with potential to be useful to Yorinobu in the distant future, but completely forgettable after he dealt with whatever his sense of honor demanded from him. I pointed at her. What you did put me on notice, both friendly and otherwise. Notice I will never be free from. For a brief moment it looked like she was about to say something placating before she leaned back in her seat and gave me a once-over and scoffed, Don't delude yourself, Em. We both know you are smarter than that. I beg your perfect fucking pardon. I frowned. You were at Zurich. She said you 1v1 at a dragoon. Who told you that? One of the singers you rescued. She shrugged the demand off to my considerable irritation and continued, But that's not important. You did some insane shit back there, Em. It might have been hidden from most of the Corps in the chaos, but not from Arasaka. You knew exactly the kind of risk you were taking when you hitched a ride with us. That doesn't come even close to justifying what happened back at Konpeki, and you know it, I point out. Maybe. She agreed. But you wanted to go independent corpo, so don't pretend like you hate the opportunity. She paused and shook her head. Honestly, I was scared shitless when you started making demands. It was a negotiation, I deadpanned. Negotiation, with Smasher in the room. She deadpanned right back. Well, since someone. I narrowed my optics. Decided to praise me to the heavens, I had to live up to the hype. Why did you push for this anyway? She paused, visibly conflicted for a moment, before slowly answering, Because I trust you, Mike. Pushing all of my incredulity into my voice, I slowly drawled out a single, dubious, right. And as much as I was annoyed about being put on the spot like this, I couldn't exactly refute her either. I was prepared for the possibility of her sharing my information with her bosses the moment I boarded that AV and came to the meeting with that in mind. It wasn't exactly a betrayal, but it wasn't not one either. And I did owe her one. Let's not panic again, Mike. I forced myself to calm. Her eyebrow twitched. Yeah, I probably deserved that one, but it doesn't change the fact you are the least likely to fuck me over in this whole city. She hesitated only for a moment before adding, My promotion didn't come for free. Yes. I was not surprised. The whole cleaning up the company spiel Yorinobu gave me made that fact pretty damn obvious. So you understand why I need someone I know I can work with here if I want to keep my head, right? Outwardly she appeared composed, but I could notice small traces of desperation in her voice and expression. She didn't want to ruin what we had, but she had nowhere else to go. And I didn't want to ruin it either. Closing my eyes and leaning back, I say, Still should have told me about it in advance at least. Too many eyes on me now. She shook her head. Even the call I made just to invite you was probably monitored by at least 3 departments, that I know of. And me simply encrypting the shit out of it would have been equally suspicious, right? A lot more suspicious, actually. She corrected, and that bitch Abernathy is just looking for an excuse to replace me with one of her own goons already. Yorinobu's support or not. Abernathy being, I prompted, Susan Abernathy, the head of special operations. Elaborated, sending me a file containing her information on the net, as she did, member of the Independents, and the biggest obstacle to Yorinobu's plans for the branch. The Independents? She paused. What do you know about Arasaka's internal factions? That they mostly do their power plays in Japan, I asked more than answered. By simple rules of volume, I was objectively correct. Funny, deadpans. But since I already dragged you into the spotlight, I'll give you the long and short of it. And sends me another file. It made for an intriguing read, to say the least. On top were the traditionalists, or the Kiji, being the kind of corporate rat that was interested in following Saburo Arasaka's original technocratic Japanocentric vision for the company and was mostly comprised of entrenched elites back in Japan. It was headed by Hanako Arasaka, with a short addendum from V that it was mostly because she acted like the safe and stable option for most of them, being the image of a dutiful daughter and all that. Next on the power ladder were the Taka, or the militarists, the direct and decisive sort of corporate rat made up of the eager and the ambitious, those looking to climb the ladder and shake up the company for the better, by their own definition of the word in any case, headed by none other than Yorinobu Arasaka, an ex-Japanese biker nomad member in the Steel Dragons, and oddly pro-Western, at least as far as his fellow big-name corpos went. Unsurprisingly, there was no addendum from V here. Third was the Hato, the so-called liberals, which was mostly made up of the corporate youths and idealists. The whole faction was for the most part treated as unserious, but was accepted as a kind of neutral party for the more creative branches of the corporate pyramid. Led by Michiko Arasaka, Sanderson by marriage, an American-born granddaughter of Saburo, and someone who only recently joined the executive board of the company, having spent most of her life in America and leading her own security company of catgirls. A quick net search confirmed Danger Gal was indeed a thing that actually existed. Well, she might be almost completely powerless on this scale, but at least she had good culture on her side. The last faction seemed to have been entirely written up by V, and it made sense considering it was the most relevant for our situation. The Independents were a comparatively tiny alliance in NC itself, made up of a number of department heads looking to distance the branch away from the main company, ostensibly due to the fact they disliked the constant belittlement and micromanagement coming from all the way in Japan and wanted to create their own vision of prosperity in Night City. Or if we are to be completely honest, the vassals didn't like paying their taxes to our most brilliant overlords over in the land of the rising sun and wanted to keep all of the money for themselves. Added to the file came a list of all the members involved and the difficulty of coercing them back to the right path. I made sure to memorize each and every one and deactivated my Korenzikov. Impressive, I said honestly, if you only started snooping upon promotion, that is. I'm good at my job, but not that good. V smirked. No, I had files on everyone in the company for months. Not worried about what could have happened if you were found out. Then I would have died, and that would have been it. She shrugs like it was no biggie. Huh. Smasher was right. You do have some balls. She just smirked at that. And speaking of Smasher, I say you do realize your little info packet makes Yorinobu out as the one most likely to start the newest corporate war out of all of them, right? Is NC going to burn because of what I agreed to do tonight? Can't ever be sure, V says after cringing at the thought. I didn't write anything down for obvious reasons, but trust me, MC Yorinobu isn't your usual corpo. Him respecting his debt to me already implied that. I agreed slowly. But that isn't anywhere near enough to inspire actual confidence. Trust, but verify, I suppose. Besides, even if he was an actual warmonger, I'd just need him long enough to grow beyond his family's ability to contain. Whether that would take me a year or a decade didn't matter. So long as I assured my survival, I was capable of winning in the end. Or so I told myself. And if you can't verify? V quirks an eyebrow. Let us hope that day never comes, I say, and slowly raise my glass of whiskey. She hesitates only briefly before clinking her glass against it, and we down our drinks. Eyeing a pair of very familiar twins slinking out from the Mox's private space and making their way towards us, I asked my final question. How soon do you think we should start with the pruning? Soon, she answered. It will take me a few days to decide where to begin, but don't expect to do more than one at a time. I don't want to raise an alarm with the rest. That would be a mess to clean up. She shivered. So a mess she was unlikely to survive, got it? Before I could say anything else, a familiar pair of voices came from the booth's edge. Our hero returns victorious. And unannounced. How cruel. Snorting, I turned to see the familiar pair of twins I saved all those many months ago. Melody, care to join us? And all too happily they did. I returned home way past midnight and feeling far less tense than I'd expected to. The twins may have somehow burrowed their way into my friendship when I wasn't looking, but I was happy for it. They had a way about them that brightened the mood no matter what. Even V had been thrown off by their own particular kind of enthusiasm, but she adapted as quickly as she usually did, and we both enjoyed a relaxing and pleasant remainder of the night. Well, not as pleasant as the twins may have hoped, but that was just how life was, unfortunately. Such was our game now, and their forwardness was amusing, even if I was pretty sure all of it was just one massive tease. Previous Mike was very teasable for some reason. Shaking that line of thinking off, I tugged at my mental connection to Logos and thought, "You've been real quiet there, buddy." Hope Kompeki wasn't too bad. Apologies for the silence. The answer came a few seconds later. The defenses I encountered at the plaza were considerable. Was there another AI? Negative. However, the Arasakas are obviously experienced with dealing with my kind, so I remained in my core and focused on pre-programming as many attack protocols as possible. Did we even stand a chance if it came down to it? I muttered as I walked by Gorlok's mighty fortress, the terrarium. It was minor but not impossible. Logos's answer came as enough of a surprise to stop me in my tracks. While their passive protections are impressive, they lacked sufficient active staffing to stop me for long. The biggest danger came from Smasher. Yes, I let out a sigh. No matter how powerful our hacking, if he gets into punching range, we are dead. And that is without mentioning the arsenal he was probably carrying beneath his plating. Scanning him without breaching his protections was impossible, so that information would remain a mystery for a while. Then you are in agreement? With what specifically? That it is time to alloy the fuck up? I failed to hold back a chuckle, immediately turning down my vocalizer so I wouldn't wake anyone up like a gonk. I suppose there is no use in delaying it. Rising my right arm, I gave it a long look over, slowly flexing my fingers as I did and feeling each and every movement, down to the nanomachines doing regular maintenance just beneath my plating. I built this out of scrap, lifted myself out of hell with my own skill. I thought nostalgically, but where we are going, scrap won't be enough. Very well, it is time. I could almost feel Logos grin through our connection. Finally. Admittedly, I shared some of his excitement, but most of my mind was occupied with resignation. It was odd how attached someone could become to an obviously outdated piece of tech. The me of tomorrow can worry about that, though. I exhaled. Start compiling possible combinations, and we can start experimenting tomorrow. I need a 12-hour nap yesterday. Logos didn't even bother answering, already browsing everything we had on metallurgy before I even finished the sentence. Chuckling at his antics, I shook my head and slinked into my room, only to stop mid-step at what I found. There sat Rebecca, glaring at the TV screen and cursing her heart out as she was repeatedly killed in a game through copious aimbot. Mike, finally. She looked at me teasingly, too busy with the twins to invite me over. Rolling my eyes, I mentally deactivated the TV, scooped her up, ignoring the alarmed "Bois," and plopped face down on the bed. A moment later, I heard her chuckle as she hugged up to me, and I was out like a log. 94. Chapter 94. Back in business. Michael Margos Sobronov. Intensive repair work continues on the abandoned Night Motors plant in Carlson Street. But even days later, no one knows which company is investing in the abandoned factory. Will this bring new life to Watson, or are we looking at another inevitable failure? I'm Angela Pierce, and this is Watson Daily. Subscribe to stay in touch. I shut the TV off with a slight irritated groan. God fucking damn it. What is it, Mikey? Mom asked, looking up from her breakfast. I just realized I'll probably have to do an interview or 3. I paused, feeling a wave of dread pass through my everything, and will have to keep doing them. Forever. The fork in my left hand cracked at the mere idea. Mom failed to keep her amused smile from showing. And how is your search for a public rep going? You said it was a pretty important position. I've narrowed it down to a few candidates, I shrugged, currently stuck between the safe option and the bold option. She raised an eyebrow. The safe one is a local down-on-her-luck model. I elaborated, knows how to speak well, looks appealing, and has confidence. You know, the standard package. And the other. Ex-Valentino priest, if you will believe it. I exhale, baffled by the fact I was even considering it. The man is looking for a fresh lease on life now that he's started a family and can't risk everything in a gang anymore. He definitely knows how to speak and carry himself, and is heavily cyberized, so he can show off the goods, as it were, but the obvious gang connections are a problem. That Jackie's recommendation? She asked. Yeah. I shook my head in amusement. He talks about the man like he can turn a strommer into a devout Christian with just his words. And how soon do you plan on interviewing them? This weekend, I informed her, have to catch up on the patient backlog first, can't lose the rep, and especially not now. And speaking of important positions, I say after chewing down my slice of pizza, what do you think about being the head of security? Nepotism, Mikey? Really? She smirks teasingly. Rolling my eyes, I give her the only suitable answer, duh. For all that I want to help my fellow man in my own way, I haven't forgotten what is the most important, which is keeping us safe, and trusting our security to someone else feels completely unacceptable. Good. She doesn't skip a beat. I'll do it. And that was that. We spent the rest of the meal in relative silence, and soon I was walking downstairs, just in time to see a haggard-looking Gloria slink into the entrance hall. Big crowd outside, Ms. Martinez? I ask. She only now notices me and flinches in surprise. No, sir, just a traffic jam. Ah, I nod. Remind me to give you an auto GPS chip when we are done for today. You have no idea how much of a time saver that thing can be. She blinks. You can do that? It's ridiculously simple, actually. I chuckle and wave for her to follow me into the clinic. And how long could you do this? She asks tentatively. Since before I could walk. I chuckle, and as I hear her stop in her tracks, I add, you never said anything about transportation issues. She sighs, and when she speaks, it sounds almost as if she is pouting. I didn't want to be a bother. You are a family friend now, Ms. Martinez. I shake my head and toss on my uniform. There is no such thing as being a bother. She offers a genuine smile at that. I'll try to remember that. See that you do. I say semi-seriously and begin mentally going through the day's appointments and my storage, activating a trio of my servitor drones to start assembling some missing parts. And your preparations for the move? We don't really have all that much to move to begin with. Our apartment is still tiny. She shakes her head. It will take us only a couple of hours to get ready when the repairs are done. Good. I hum in satisfaction. She would obviously be moving into the residential tower once it was done. Gloria had long since gone up from a mere convenience to becoming indispensable, and I was more than happy to offer her a large apartment near the top of the tower as part of her work benefits for that dedication. And that was without factoring in the inevitability she was going to become a massive target once I started stepping on toes. She was far too heavily involved in my plans to leave in the open, and on a less cynical level, I'd hate to see something bad happen to her or her kid. So the solution was evident. Chugging down the last of her iced coffee, she checked her optics and stood up. Miss Park just arrived. I'll go and write her up. I merely hummed in the affirmative and went into my workshop to pick up the necessary heart replacement. How that chunky woman was still alive with so much clogging in her heart baffled me, but I found I was rather content with not knowing the answer. Before I returned to the clinic, I checked my agent for a message from Rebecca and found none. She'd left abruptly early in the morning, looking all kinds of irritated at something, and refused to elaborate aside from someone was being a dickhead. I could make some guesses based just on that, and was frankly thankful to be kept out of that particular drama. I tended to get punchy around dickheads. Well, she could take care of herself, and I had a Monday to grind out. Time to get back to work. Rebecca, getting back to her old apartment, or her bro's apartment now, after months of being away, felt weird. The shitty doors she'd dented the last time she was here were still just as damaged and barely opened up as she inserted the security code, and the moment they did, the smell hit her. She stopped her face from scrunching up and stepped inside, finding exactly the kind of mountain of trash she'd expected to. And on top of the sole clean bit of it, all sat her bro, still wearing his shitty unwashed jacket, with traces of hard glitter smeared just under his nose. He looked half awake at first and only noticed her after a good 10 seconds of her tapping her foot. He shook his head awake and blinked, as if only now realizing she was there. "Hey, sis." He waved lazily. "Sup?" She returned. "You good?" He just leaned back into the couch at that and smirked. Just perfect. She felt like punching something, but forced the feeling down. "So why'd you call me?" "It's been a while." He shrugs. "Feels like I haven't seen you in years, Becca." Her eye twitches. "We were at Maine's bar like a week ago." "For real?" He blinks. "Huh." The urge for violence grew as she raised her clutched fist, but she grit her teeth, took a deep breath, regretted it immediately, and gave her high-off-his-ass brother a pleading look. "Bro, you are killing yourself. Let me—" "Again with this bullshit?" He explodes out of nowhere, glaring at her through his stupid fucking visor. She went to say something, but he just kept going. "Maybe you enjoy selling out to your chrome joy toy, but I'm no one's bitch." He snarled before his expression twisted into a sneer. "Sorry to tell you, sis, but these cheeks don't open for money." The implied "unlike yours" was obvious. She growled, "I am trying to help you." And she really was. Once she got the time to just sit down and think in peace, she realized just how overfucked the two of them had been by having to survive on the streets for just under a decade. She lucked out in finding the mocks to help her through it, but her bro only managed to cope by becoming an everything addict. She couldn't do anything about the drinking or about the BDs, but she could at least try to help him with the drugs. Drugs that Mike quickly confirmed were going to kill him before 2080 if he kept it up. So she got to work, saved up so he couldn't say it was charity from her boyfriend, and even tried the slow approach when she tried convincing him. It all backfired massively, and Pilar reacted like she'd asked him to sell his soul or something, ranting at her and mocking her whenever she tried to broach the subject. And as much as she wanted to help, after a bunch of attempts, she just kind of stopped trying, both with him and the crew. At first it was unconscious. She simply found it more comfortable to work alone, and then with Sasha, once she got good enough with her, running to act without constant support. But then back around New Year's work slowed down due to a few fuck-ups in planning on Maine's end, and a shitty choice in fixers who couldn't keep their word. She started working on her own more and more often, and it all simply clicked better when she had no one breathing down her neck. She was damn good at what she did. "Help me?" Pilar growled back. "You think I'm just going to abandon everything and whore myself out, just like you?" He didn't get to finish the sentence as a cardboard box smashed into his face fast enough to rip in two and nearly bowl him over backwards. "Ah, fuck," he cursed, clutching at his bleeding nose. "I'm not listening to this shit again," Rebecca hissed. She knew her fucking worth, and no amount of bitching was going to make her ruin what she had. Ignoring her disappointment, she glared back at the gonk and asked, "What did you actually want, Pilar?" "A box, sis." He chuckled nasally, ignoring her question. "Too poor for your bullets now, am I?" "Not being in constant danger is wonderful for the temper," she says with fake cheer. "Your Borg owner tell you that?" he mocked, and she answered instantly, "Yep." "Well, fuck me then." Pilar snorted, bleeding all over his face as he did. "He got you nice and tamed, eh?" "Fuck off, asshole." She flipped him off. "Ha! No," Pilar barked out. "Why did you call me Pilar?" Rebecca's impatience finally won out. "You made it sound like some kind of emergency." Her bro frowned and turned uncharacteristically serious. "Just thought I'd tell you. Maine is chasing some new chrome, got a big gig coming from his asshole fixer. But he's been talking about putting you and Sasha on the bench." "He fucking what?" she asked, suddenly feeling. She wasn't sure what she was feeling if she was being honest, but it fucking sucked. "He said he's thinking about benching you." Pilar shrugs and repeats, seemingly not giving a fuck one way or the other. "Something about that gig you two refused a month back." "He's still pissed about that." Rebecca frowns, voice turning icy. "When he can't even get proper info from his stupid asshole of a fixer." "Hey, I'm not saying you're wrong." Her bro raises his hands placatingly. Just what he's been yapping about. Apparently the four-eyed bitch sold him some crap about not being in control of his own people. And Maine lapped that up immediately. She realized with a frown and felt a sudden spike of cold fury. Is that right? Pilar just shrugged, wiping some glitter off his face and licking his fingers. But she was too furious to feel disgust right now and merely glared. Well then, you go tell Maine he can go fuck himself. I'm no one's bench, bitch. She breathed in, and tell him that until he gets a new fixer, I'm not doing shit with him. Instantly, it seemed like all the glitter left Pilar's bloodstream. You serious? Deadly, she growled. Bex, he stood up, almost panicked. He'll kick you from the crew over this. She was not having it. If he likes his pride more than his people, he can take his crew and shove it. Pilar looked hurt for a moment, but then shook his head and smiled. You're right, sis. You are no one's bitch. You're damn right. She slowly grins and tosses him a pack of detoxifiers. This is all my money, so don't cry too much. He just snorts. Guessing you don't feel like staying over? Thanks for telling me, bro, but... She trails off, looking over the apartment and feeling herself frown again. But I really feel like shooting something right now. Yeah, that sounds about right. He chuckles. She gave him a wave, which he returned and went to leave. But before she reached the door, she heard her bro speak up again. For what it's worth, sis. I'm happy for you. Her frown softened as she muttered a barely audible, thanks, bro, and stepped out of the apartment. As she walked out of the building, she saw the familiar brightly colored Mizutani Shion, owned by Sasha, waiting for her with the engine still on. Without a word, she entered on the co-driver's seat and found Sasha slumped over the steering wheel, eyes staring off into the distance while probably browsing the net or something. Rebecca gently shook her awake, and the suddenly very groggy netrunner blinked herself awake, and seeing Rebecca's frown, she asked, what happened? For a moment she hesitated and then told her everything. By the time she was done, Sasha looked somewhere between tearful and furious. You don't have to follow me out, Sasha, Rebecca reassured, but I'm sick and fucking tired of Maine doing the same thing over and over again, and I'm not taking that shit anymore. No. Sasha shook her head lightly. You are right, Maine's stupid-ass fixer is going to fuck him over. Things used to be simpler. Rebecca sighed and nodded. Yeah. Slowly the netrunner turned to face her. So that's it, huh? Who would have thought? Rebecca smirked. Sasha thinks suicide by being a gonk is bad. Hey, her chum points at her. It was for a good cause. You keep telling yourself that. Rebecca laughed before slowly turning serious. That's enough of the depressing shit. Want me to grab us some gigs? Sasha's eyes brightened slightly and she cheered. Hell yeah, girl. Wasting no time, Rebecca called her favorite fixer. Yo, Auntie Wakako. Got some scavs you need deleted. Me and my girl need to vent a bit. Wakako's expression turned amused on the hollow. Of course, young Rebecca, I have 3 spots you might find fun. Gimme all 3, she said immediately. There was no surprise on the fixer's face as she sent the data over. Do you want me to call the salvage teams over this time as well? Hell yeah, Rebecca grinned. Free money is free money. Indeed. The fixer nodded. Report to me once you are done. Sure thing, Auntie. She mock saluted and ended the call. Hit the gas, Sasha. She told her chum, Guts needs to make some new friends. Shivering in fake fear, the netrunner began driving to Japantown. Michael Magos Sobronov. The amount of blood that needed throwing out after every Monday never stopped surprising me. Intellectually, I knew that doing highly invasive surgeries on dozens of people in a short span of time would inevitably result in something like that, but seeing is believing, as they said, and seeing the results of my work was always impressive. To the point I had to come up with a system to drain it all away in a short amount of time to a different part of the clinic because most of the patients tended to get all panicky over a few leftover splotches. It isn't like I left them over anywhere close to where they could act as contaminants, but explaining that to confused old people who needed their pacemakers replaced with something more efficient and permanent was a massive waste of time, even for Gloria, who had far more patience for that kind of thing than I. So I just drained it all away as best as I could and did my best to be patient. My next clinic is going to come with everything pre-built, and that was a fact. I tossed my uniform over into the washing machine and hung my coat over my shoulders before making my way up to the kitchen for the usual after-work drinks, just to make sure everything is in order before I finally got to planning out my upgrades. But I paused as found Gloria frowning, or more accurately glaring at a wall as she listened to someone speak over her agent. Very well, I will be there quickly. She ended the call and sighed. What happened, Gloria? Mom asked her. David got into a fight with another student. My assistant slumped in her seat. The principal just called me over for a parents' meeting. Did it sound like they are going to try something stupid? I asked, referring to trying to drop him due to class politics or something equally suicidal. No, Gloria shook her head, but they are demanding I come over on principle. I could give you a ride. My car is faster than yours, Mom proposes. You, don't have work? Gloria blinks. Mum just smirks at that. My work is just a formality. I mostly just hang out with Reggie and call it keeping her alive. She shoots me a knowing look before turning back to Gloria. I've got the time. Thanks, Lana. Gloria stands up. The sooner I can pull David out of school by the ear, the better. That boy will be the death of me. Recognizing the exact tone she was using, I sent a quick prayer over for my poor compatriot. 95, Chapter 95, David Interlude. The wannabe. The air in the office of Arasaka Academy's principal was heavy as said old man methodically typed out on his keyboard, each press of the button just sharp enough to stop the two bruised and battered students from relaxing. David Martinez did his best not to fidget in his chair and kept his face as impassive as he could, but the asshole giving him smug looks from just a few feet away kept reigniting his anger. Shooting a glance at an only somewhat bruised Katsuo Tanaka, he imagined feeding him his own teeth for the 5th time since they arrived. The mental image was enough to calm him down a bit, though it did not help him with feeling like one big person-shaped bruise. Grimacing, his thoughts inevitably took him to what got him into this mess. The day had started out like usual. He got up early in the morning, did his homework, said his goodbyes to his mum, and took the NCART and attended classes. Absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. He was a bit excited for the test results that would be coming out, but outside hanging out with some of his new chums for a bit, it was all supposed to be business as usual. Of course, that all changed when the results did come out, and he found out he was at the top of his class for the semester. And some people really did not take his open satisfaction well. They all congratulated him politely, of course, but the moment he went out to grab lunch, he found himself cornered by the class asshole, who had somehow managed to fuck up basic management to the point he'd almost needed to schedule a repeat test like a complete gonk, and his two hangers-on. One thing led to another, and as much as David tried, he couldn't ignore the tiny fucker shit talking his mom and punched him in the face. Under Magos's patient urging, but mostly the Borg's inputs, he'd started learning how to fight and quickly realized he was pretty damn good at it. So the haymaker he smacked Tanaka with should have been the end of it, which is when the blue-haired asshole pulled a move straight out of a cheap kung fu BD and proceeded to fold him so fast he barely knew what was going on, before he was on the ground and getting kicked by all three of them. Fucking skill chips, he spat mentally. It really wasn't all that hard to figure out once he wasn't getting his bones tenderized. Shooting Tanaka another look and seeing him wince nearly made him grin. But the principal spoke up before he could. Your respective parents have been informed of your misdemeanor. They should be arriving soon. Neither he nor Tanaka were dumb enough to talk back and merely bowed their heads. Too bad the other two had been pretty much ignored in the whole thing, but he wasn't going to escalate like a gonk. That would only drag their families into the mix, and he'd already fucked up more than enough. The minutes ticked by as they waited, and by the time the auto doors opened up, David's heart was somewhere up in his throat. The feeling of unease only growing as a man as wide as he was square, with only some resemblance to his asshole classmate, briskly walked inside. Ah, Mr. Tanaka. The principal smiled politely. Thank you for your prompt response. Tanaka Jr. perked up and went to stand, already pointing fingers at David. Yeah, Dad, this gutter trash. One cold look from his father had him shutting up and sitting back down. Satisfied, Tanaka Sr. finally said something. Make it quick, Principal. I had to postpone an important meeting for this. By this point, David was already starting to feel panic set in. He wasn't a gonk, and he knew who owned the academy. Nervously, he reached for his neck and tried to prepare a defense. and nearly deflated when he heard the door shunt open again, with the familiar footsteps of his very pissed-off mother echoing with it. He looked up only to wince as he saw her still wearing her exo-implants and the few tiny smears of blood barely visible on her odd robe-like lab coat. Wisely, when she shot him a questioning look, he kept his mouth shut. "Ms. Martinez," the principal said, his tone a lot less polite than when he addressed the Saka exec, if missing the sneer David was expecting. "Good, you are on time." "Tell us what happened," Tanaka Sr. ordered without wasting a second. "Your sons were found full contact, fighting each other in the hallways of the academy." The principal informed them bluntly, "And this isn't their first scuffle either. We've let most of them go for now, as we understand young men need to compete in their own way. But today's escalation demands intervention." He turned the screen of his computer over, displaying the whole event from a conveniently placed camera, except the sound recording was, of course, unavailable due to a glitch, and they all got to watch as David threw the first punch and how he was then beaten down in self-defense. Katsuo shot him a smug look from across the office, but David kept his face flat as the recording went on until security arrived and pulled the trio back. "As you can clearly see, both sides behaved in a manner completely unacceptable for members of this academy," the principal said gravely, shooting a pointed look at his mom. "Your son especially, Ms. Martinez, seems to still act on base impulse despite his high scores." Taking him completely off guard, instead of pleading or apologizing, his mom merely raised an eyebrow. "My son must have had a good reason to throw that punch. He is not some thug, principal." The old man frowned. "Mom, I assure you that no matter what was said, striking a fellow student is still completely unacceptable. Such behavior could affect his academic future if not corrected." "Agreed." His mom nodded, making David wince, before demanding, "And is cornering and surrounding someone in a group considered acceptable behavior?" The principal shot Tanaka Sr. a questioning glance, but the Arasaka exec might as well have been carved from stone as far as his reaction went, making his son turn paler and paler by the moment. "Of course not, Ms. Martinez," the principal assured after what David could almost swear was a quiet gulp. "I merely seek to point out the issues so that they may not be repeated. Young Katsuo will receive equal reprimand for his poor behavior." "Of course," Gloria Martinez hummed in satisfaction, shooting a look at the other parent present and getting a mere blank stare in return. "Good," the principal nodded. "While I would prefer to assign at least a week of suspension to make the point stick, I will trust that you are capable of instilling proper behavior in your children on your own." Neither parent made a sound as he addressed him and Katsuo. "And you two, do you have anything to say for yourselves?" David grit his teeth as he spoke up faster than Katsu could. "I apologize for my lack of discipline, principal. It will not happen again." Every word felt like he was choking down on SCOP, but he managed it somehow. Katsuo's face twisted as the old fart's look of satisfaction, and knowing his little plan was fucked, he just lowered his head and parroted David's words, earning a brief nod of his own. "Is that it?" Tanaka Sr. demanded. "That is all, sir." Before he was even done speaking, Tanaka Sr. grabbed his son by the scruff of his uniform, shot David and Gloria a cold look, and dragged Katsuo out, the blue-haired cunt hissing and wincing all the way. "Thank you for your patience, Principal," David's mom said a moment later and waved for him to follow along, shushing him as he went to speak and making way for the parking lot outside. Before they could get that far, though, David thought he heard something and slowed his steps, pausing at the entrance of one of the side hallways and just in time to see Tanaka Sr. slap a few teeth out of his son's mouth. "You are a waste of time and money, Katsuo," the man said with no emotion. "You will not make me come here again." "Yes, father." The dazed teen nodded, tears running down his face. David saw the older man pause and start turning and quickly made himself scarce, catching up to his frowning mother a moment later. "What was that?" she asked quietly, but he just shook his head. "Corpo rat bullshit." Gloria frowned. "Sorry." He winced, schooling the expression just as they stepped out of the building. She sighed and shook her head. "What am I going to do with you?" They approached Gloria's car and tensed as they saw a trio of Arasaka security guards staring down a rather unamused and fully armed Svetlana, the well over half cyberized woman looking like she would just as happily remove their heads as she would shake their hands. Thankfully, Gloria was used to her quirks by now and merely waved, "Hey Lana, any trouble?" The three Saka goons nearly dropped on their asses in relief as she stopped staring at them and smiled back at her chum. "Just making some friends, Glory." She paused and her eyes narrowed threateningly again. "Who did this to you, David?" He winced under the focused attention, but simply waved it off. "Don't worry, Mrs. Sobranov. It's been dealt with." "Has it?" she asked, tapping her foot for a few seconds before accepting it. "Fine, and it's Svetlana, kid. How many times must I repeat myself?" "Sorry." David rubbed the back of his head. Smiling, Gloria waved for them to get in the car. "Come on, there should be some Mac stock in the trunk, and I'm not letting you stay bruised, even if you might deserve it." David winced again and did as he was told. The moment they were all sat inside and the goons made some distance, Gloria's entire demeanor shifted as the car somehow began driving itself, and she shot David a look. "All right, mijo. What exactly happened?" Feeling a pair of demanding stares, David did what any proud young man would do and immediately folded and spilled everything without a single half-truth. Well, at least until he reached a certain point in the conversation. "What did he call her?" Svetlana asked far too calmly. "I'd rather not say." David winced. "Just thinking about it makes me want to kick the asshole in the dick." "Let it go, Lana." Gloria shook her head. "What's done is done. And David—" He straightened his back, ready for the scolding of his life. "Good job." Gloria beamed and patted his head. "Record scratch." "What?" he asked intelligently. Svetlana failed to contain a faint snort at that. "You shouldn't let those bastardos walk all over you," Gloria kept going proudly, "especially now that they can't pay their way into having you kicked out. But, and there it is. Don't do it again if you can help it," she said before frowning. "Do you still have your recording chip?" He patted his neck, making his neural port eject an advanced-looking chip. "Got everything from beginning to end." "Good job," Gloria smiled. "But why didn't you ask me to use it?" He couldn't help but ask, still feeling a bit confused by the entire thing. He was ready to present it at a moment's notice back in the office, but for some reason it just never happened. "Because the longer you don't have to use it, the better." She told him patiently, "If you can get out of a situation without it, good. Save it for when you really need it. Once you reveal it, your rivals will become a lot more careful." Svetlana tossed in her own two eddies. "Right." David nodded, slowly getting the idea. "Got it." "Oh," Gloria suddenly palmed her face. "I set the car to drive us home. Do you want me to drop you off anywhere, Lana?" She paused and added, "Or you could come up for some coffee. We never have guests." "I could have a cup." The grey-haired woman smiles. "Too bad Mikey won't give you a day off. We could have had a girls' night out." "Don't even say that." Gloria shakes her head. "He already gives me way too much. I don't know what to do with myself." "My Mikey is the best," Svetlana nodded proudly. And it was there David started zoning the conversation out. Sure, he was happy his mum was happy, and that he wasn't about to have his ear ripped off in a righteous scolding, but once those two got going with their embarrassing praise of their children, he knew better than to listen. He shuddered at the deep mental scars he'd already been dealt and swore to never let himself get caught off guard. In his absent mental state, he barely even noticed the sudden shadows overtaking the sides of their car, and only a piercing shriek from Svetlana for them both to get down woke him up from his daze a moment before everything above the dashboard was turned into fine glass and metal chunks by a pair of drive-by shooters doing their best to murder each other. A shotgun shell hit the engine block and the car suddenly swerved, the safety lock snapping into place to stop an explosion and causing the entire thing to flip over in the process. Miraculously, David was still conscious when the thing stopped flipping, and thanked his lucky stars for the fact his seatbelt didn't snap as he disengaged it and began crawling outside. He felt the sting of broken glass pressing into his skin, but the roar of gunfire and pained noises outside stopped him from focusing on it, until he finally managed to roll out into freedom and quickly tried to understand what was happening around him, only to feel a deep chill set into his bones as he saw the two other cars, one van and another caravan car, had been smashed into the walls of the inter-district bridge, and their occupants had been painted across the asphalt. Their bodies had been torn to shreds, the ones he could barely make out as scabs had simply been broken like so much cheap plastic, while the others, the animal members, seemed to have either been gouged to death or blown up from point-blank range. It was an image straight out of a slaughterhouse, and he didn't even notice anything happening before it was over. Sure, he was distracted by dear God, what the fuck? He wiped the dizziness from his eyes and looked for any other source of noise, finding it almost immediately. The last of the attackers still alive, an animal member, judging by his build, uselessly clutched and scratched at the chrome hand, easily rising him above ground, cursing his heart out and begging intermittently before screaming in pain as the other metal limb sunk into his chest and ripped his still-beating heart out before crushing it in its inhuman grip. Svetlana Sobranov's face twitched in David's direction, and he wasn't ashamed to admit he very nearly shat himself then and there. The grey-haired cyborg blinked and tossed the animal like an empty sack. "Where is Glory?" she asked calmly. Far too calmly. David immediately rushed around the car and felt his world spin as he saw a deep, expanding splotch of blood becoming larger and larger by the second. And the source of it was obvious. He choked on air as he opened his mouth and just barely wheezed out, "Mom?" 96, Chapter 96, On the Edge. The wannabe. He felt his hands shaking as he stood there, rooted in his spot and staring uselessly at the bloody scene in front of him. Blood flowed from an unmoving body riddled with holes and crushed under the weight of broken metal. All he could do in his state was desperately push away the obvious from forming into a coherent sentence and reach for blame as he realized their last dose of Maxdoc had been spent on his scrapes. The moment stretched into infinity before he was snapped out of it by a metal hand landing on his shoulder so suddenly he nearly toppled over, and only then did he realize he had been hyperventilating. "Calm down, it isn't over yet," his mom's cyborg friend ordered and approached the car. "Is she—" David refused to finish the sentence. The older woman didn't answer him, and instead reached for his mother's pockets, pulling out an injector he didn't recognize and depressing it into Gloria's neck with a quiet hiss. "This should keep her stable until we get her to Mikey," Svetlana informed him. For a moment, her almost nonchalant assurance failed to compute. He'd long since memorized all of the medical aids available to the most powerful core out there, and he knew, despite his own denial of the fact, that none of them should be able to do anything meaningful except buy a few minutes of time. None of them should be capable of what was happening before his very eyes. The wounds on Gloria's body seemed to be actively closing on their own, and the blood had practically stopped flowing in less than 5 seconds since injection. He wanted to reach for her, but in his astonishment, he just kept standing there, useless. "I called for a ride." Svetlana dragged him from his idiotic thoughts. "Come here and help me get her out." He got to work immediately and carefully dragged his mother out while Svetlana crushed the car, pressing down on her into pieces, so she wouldn't get even more hurt. Usually he'd be wowed by the show of strength. This time he simply filed it away and got to helping as best as he could. About a minute later, Svetlana became alert and cursed, "Shit." She reached for Gloria, shoved David out of the way, and tossed her over her shoulder. "We need to make some space. The NCPD is coming." She was already moving by the time she finished her sentence, and David was left with no choice but to chase after her through all of his aches, the distant sound of police sirens reaching his ears only a moment later. Only he found himself slowing down as he heard a wet cough, his attention drawn to a scav who had somehow survived being gutted by a round of buckshot and was currently trying to crawl away with his hands, leaving a trail of blood behind him. David wasn't sure what came over him as he met the fucker's eyes, but in the next moment he was reaching for one of the pistols scattered across the road and aiming it at his head. The scav was young, probably younger than him, and his eyes widened in pain and panic as he saw what was happening. With fearful tears in his eyes, he choked out a "please." David pulled the trigger, ignoring the painful tug of the Niue fighting against his grip and the far too bright flash of the muzzle as he glared hatefully at the fresh corpse. He shoved the gun into his pocket and ran after Svetlana. When he finally caught up, all he got was complete silence and the cold, judgmental gaze of a blood-covered cyborg, He did not gather the courage to speak up before Rebecca and Sasha reached them with their ride, and they were speeding back to H11. "Want to come upstairs?" Rebecca asked him with a concerned look in her eyes. "Mike is going to take his time in there, you know?" "No thanks." David shook his head absently, still staring off into the wall. I think I need some time to think." "Sure thing, Davy." She chirped and waved, the expression turning strained as he failed to react. "We'll be in the dining room if you change your mind." He just nodded, saying nothing else, as she kept looking at him for a few seconds before accepting it and leaving him alone in the reception room. They had practically been pushed along when they arrived. Even the tiger claws made sure that their way was clear, which briefly helped him deal with his previous numbness. But then they got to the clinic and Magos pretty much shut the doors in their faces the moment Gloria was inside, his only words a cold "out," before his back unfurled with his swarm of inhuman surgical implants. Even out here, David could just barely make out the distinct sound of a medical drill meeting bone, and it made him shiver in discomfort. Even if he knew there was probably no one better in the city to make sure his mother would live. All he could do now was wait and hope and think. And think he did, about everything that had happened and more. He blamed the scavs, then the animals, then the academy for dragging his mom there, and most of all he blamed himself for being weak. There was no question about their chances of survival if Svetlana had not been there, and David hated that, hated the fear it made him feel. The kind of fear that made him shoot the scav just so he could feel a tiny bit of control again. He felt pathetic. Another hour passed as he stewed in his own head, and he nearly missed the distinct ringing noise echoing in his head as he received a message that shoved itself into his retina without his prompting. "Magos, get your ass in here, Martinez." He blinked and then practically leapt onto his feet, rushing into the clinic so quickly he had to be stopped from crashing into a wheeled tool bench by a mechanical pincer, grabbing him by the scruff of his academy uniform. His eyes immediately found his sleeping mother, and they very nearly fell out of his skull when he saw her laying on the Ripper chair, looking like the previous few hours simply did not happen. Ignoring Magos's unimpressed stare, he managed to stammer out a, how is she?" "We were fortunate," the cyborg began as he methodically hosed blood off his knife-like fingers. There were no headshots and only one lower spine hit. The bleeding was bad, but she reached only critical levels of blood loss. "How the fuck is that lucky?" David asked before he could stop himself. "Tone, Martinez." Magos's eyes narrowed, making him gulp. He did elaborate a moment later, though. "What I mean to say is that she received no brain damage." He paused as he started cleaning his other hand. David looked away, doing his best not to pay attention to the volumes of blood being washed away. "I can repair, regenerate, or replace most things," the cyborg went on. "But brain damage means there is a chance of memory or personality loss. That is why I say we were lucky. I only needed to sew some skin and graft some bone and muscle." The clinical tone in which he explained it made David shiver all over again. "So she will be fine then?" "Oh, more than fine. She will wake up tomorrow at the latest." The Borg's 4 golden pupils brightened. "Of course, I made sure something as banal as low-caliber gunfire will not bother her again." "What?" David asked dumbly. "I have taken the liberty of providing Ms. Martinez with high-grade subdermal armoring and thickened muscle grafts, both articles of my own design from the private list." The Borg went on like what he was saying was completely normal. "What?" David repeated, shaking his head before his world narrowed. "You can't just—" "Answer me this, Martinez." The Borg cut him off without so much as a twitch, and something in his tone made the teen stop in his tracks. "Why am I not going berserk about what happened today, when, by all rights, I should be tracking everyone involved down?" "Because it wasn't your mom getting shot up," David snapped, and his emotional response may as well have been a wet fart, as the Borg simply tilted his head. "True, but that is only half of the answer." David's shoulders slumped. "Stop jerking me around and just tell me, man. I'm really not in the mood right now." His answer seemed to briefly amuse Magos, who huffed and said, "The point, Martinez, is that no matter what those fools did, or for whatever reason, they are incapable of so much as scratching my mother. The flesh is weak, Martinez." The Borg's optics narrowed. And cyberware removes that weakness. In the end, those gangoons were nothing but bugs for her to crush beneath her boot. Do you understand? The sheer intensity of the stare made David take a step back before he caught himself, clearing his throat and forcing out a yeah, I get you. Guess he was just showing his worry in his own way. I feel like you were thinking something incredibly stupid just now, the Borg said dryly, but I suppose I can ignore it for now. More importantly, what are you going to do about all this? Do? David blinked. Is there even anything I can do? I don't know. The Borg shrugged. It's all up to you, isn't it? David found himself unable to answer. They nearly took everything from you. The cyborg went on calmly. And for what? Nothing more than collateral. He gave David a questioning sidelong look. They did not find you relevant enough to stop their shooting for even a blink. David's fist clenched so hard, the skin turned paper white. And your plan is to just let them get away with it? They are already dead, David hissed out. There is no one left to kill. And what about their tombs? The ones who made the job possible? The ones who gave them weapons? The Borg paused, voice still just as flat and mildly curious as before. Do they get away with everything just because they didn't happen to be there? Stop! David raised both his hands, his whole posture deflating as the questions hit one after another. Just stop. The Borg folded his arms and waited. You are right. They don't deserve to get away. David exhaled. But I have no idea where to even begin looking for them. Suddenly, he stopped himself, and his eyes narrowed slightly as he looked the towering cyborg over. Tell me how. Oh? Margos tilted his head. Teach me how to make them pay, David demanded, and Margos grinned, terrifying rows of teeth on full display. I thought you'd never ask. Michael Margos Sobronov. They are closing in. I heard from below me he's got them boxed in. Good, I said. Hopefully we won't have to interfere. Rebecca glares through the scope of her necomata. For once I agree, even if I'd like to see my baby make the animals go poof. You always choose the most delightful pastimes. I quipped lightly and sent out another ping across the local net. Kicking David into gear was incredibly easy, considering his mental state, and to my genuine surprise, he took to my lessons like a fish to water. By which I mean I gave him a few contact numbers and attached my name to the call and left him to it. It was sink or swim, and I wanted to know if he would swim like I did when my time came. He wasn't even aware we were up here, watching his every move. And my hunch was proven correct, as it looked like his academic performance wasn't some fluke, and he managed to negotiate with both Regina and Padre while making only a few amateur mistakes. Admittedly, acting a bit emotional with this particular duo of fixers was the least damning, as Jones was very soft under her professional surface, and Padre looked at David like one of his own, which, considering he grew up on his turf, was technically true. Once he got over the initial hurdles and got the investigation going from both ends, I discreetly sent the fixers the relevant data about a certain scav cell in Watson and a group of animals that kept one of their gyms in Vista del Rey, and organizing the strikes for some premium urgency pay was as easy as firing off a number after that. It also helped that the animals stole a massive stock of medicine-relevant chemicals the scavs were bringing in from overseas, and the fixers were all too happy to get their grubby hands on that kind of stash, so they were more than happy to give my protégé a good deal. Privately, I was quite amused when David realized he'd need to cover the costs from his end once he realized I wouldn't be participating, as far as he knew, and even more so when he realized he had access to Gloria's accounts and saw the numbers hiding in there. His mom was one of the bigger fishes in this city now, not even close to being one of the sharks, mind you, by sheer virtue of her own diligence, frugality, and all-around usefulness, and neither of them knew it. It was hilarious. It was also why I decided to give David a push. Despite his academic successes, his studies at Arasaka's brainwashing center were still aimless, and considering my future plans, it wouldn't do for him to be a weak link that could be used against us. I needed to know if he could stand on his own, or if he'd need constant observation and protection in the case someone decided to get to me through Gloria, and to Gloria through him. It was a very callous way to look at things, I know, But it wasn't purely for my own benefit, and I was still quite fucking livid at the fuckers who poked at me and mine for no good reason. So I settled on a trial by fire. Gloria was going to be so incredibly pissed when she woke up, but I personally thought a furious rant from a livid Latina was a worthwhile price to pay for peace of mind and a bit of petty vengeance. And if I just happened to poach a hidden talent from Arasaka in the future, then that would just be another happy little accident. Breach, Rebecca informed me, despite me already having a perfect view of the situation, the animals still don't see them. It was almost nostalgic in a way, watching David covered head to toe in the best body armor he could grab on short notice, as he snuck into the base with 3 veteran ex-Valentinos Padre sent his way. He was incredibly stupid for participating directly like this, of course. He had basic firearms training and was only somewhat fit physically. But it was exactly the fact he moved in without barely any experience to punish those who would harm his family that made me feel that way. Doubly so as they began putting them down like dogs with copious bursts of incendiary ammunition. Animals were juicers, steroid abusers to the point of making their skin nearly impenetrable to small arms fire, but point an assault rifle at them with a tiny little incendiary charge in every single bullet. They went up like dry straw. Watching them try to put themselves out was quite cathartic. The execution, for that was exactly what this was, lasted for all about 3 minutes before Rebecca clicked her tongue in seeming disappointment and stood up. They got them all. How did our newbie do? I asked, quickly looking over the message about what was going on in the scav hideout and grinning as Jones notified me they'd all been put down. Shaking like a lil bitch but still standing, Rebecca grinned. We'll make a solo out of him yet. And Gloria will kill us for it, I pointed out. Rebecca stilled, her smile turning strained. Guess he can be the fixer wannabe then? Snorting at the idea, I nodded. We might actually survive that one. Back in position, I barked suddenly as I saw the 3 Valentinos surrounding David through the outline, only to exhale in relief as I saw them patting his shoulders and cheering him on. Damn Tinos probably think he passed some rite of passage or something. I shook my head, not far from the truth now that I think about it. Never mind. It's really cute how paranoid you are, Rebecca cooed from her prone position. How is paranoia cute? I frown. She hops up with a cheeky grin on her face. Or don't pretend, Mikey. She hops and pats my shoulder. You know I love it when you get all protective. I'm just being responsible. I huff and look away, much to her amusement. Let's get going. We did what we came to do. She tittered and then cheerily frolicked towards the maintenance stairs without a care in the world. Looking back at the burning gym, I couldn't help but smile at the hauntingly familiar scene. In essence, if not in appearance. 97. Chapter 97, Worries and Schemes. Michael Magos Sobranov. I gave my morbidly fascinated girlfriend a quick salute before dipping the hell out of the dining room and shutting the doors behind me, just in time for a veritable slew of Spanish and Spanish-adjacent curses to begin flowing from my still-recovering patient's mouth in such a mighty quantity and variety, even the most dedicated linguist would find themselves as impressed as horrified. Mom would have probably managed to calm her down, but she was still busy chasing down scavs and exacting her well-deserved revenge on their pathetic existence. I made a quick prayer for mercy on David's soul, because his own mother was certainly not about to show any. You will be remembered, I thought solemnly and ran for the clinic. It had been just under a full day since my mother and the Martinez's encounter with Night City's wildlife, and aside from a now furious Gloria, things had been rather peaceful. Yesterday's punitive raids were barely even blips on the usual radar, and even when they got mentioned, it was mostly just by those nosy enough to find out about them happening, noting the fact they existed and quickly moving on to something more interesting. The greatest damage I took from the whole thing was having to deal with clients on my own for the first time after months of not having to bother, and I will admit I found myself genuinely surprised by the amount of honest concern some of the customers were showing at Gloria's absence. And by some, I mean almost all the Tiger Claw regulars and their corporate contacts. She'd somehow managed to befriend, or at least make a good impression on almost all of them in the minute or so of conversation she usually got before their appointments. By the time I'd heard the third old Asian woman sigh in relief when I informed her Gloria was only suffering some minor health issues, I was slowly starting to believe my assistant was something not quite human. Or I just sucked at human interaction to the point it being this easy seemed like witchcraft. Having finished my work for the day, I was just about to start going through work reports on the factory when I heard the door open behind me and 2 pairs of steps come in. "You shouldn't be up," I tell Gloria. "A chemical coma isn't exactly rest." The Latina smiled despite her poor mood and nodded. "I will have some sleep in a bit." She was staying in the guest room upstairs just in case some unexpected complications popped up. Her eyes narrowed a bit. "Tell me honestly, Michael, did you know?" "Know about what?" I shot quiet Rebecca behind her a questioning look, receiving a wince in turn. "About what David did last night." Gloria elaborated with eyes narrowing even further. And without skipping a beat, I shrugged. "Yes." She went to say something, but I barreled through. We were watching him the whole time, making sure he didn't get himself killed. But he managed to deal with everything on his own. It was almost impressive. She shot Becca a look, who merely stuck her tongue out and made a tehe sound before deciding the walls of my clinic were incredibly interesting all of a sudden. Sighing in a mix of frustration and fondness, the woman turned back to me and went to speak before pausing, and then going through that cycle a few more times before finally asking, "Why didn't you stop him? He has a bright future ahead of him. He didn't need to get involved with that life." I expected accusation or vitriol by now, but she just seemed tired, which made me feel like an asshole as I looked away and answered, "He is studying at Arasaka, he lives in Night City, and you are now wealthy enough to be considered worth robbing." She did not seem particularly pleased with the compliment. I shrugged. Best he learn how to navigate the edge from relative safety instead of scrambling for it when someone inevitably tries fucking him over. It was always a question of when and not if. Somehow, that bit of truth managed to sour Gloria's expression even further, and she sighed, muttering to herself more than she did to me, "Is there really no other way to exist in this damn city?" Her idealism was impressive, but it was even more naive. It's either get ready or stay sheltered and pray you don't get shot up by random gangoons. I bluntly informed her of the truth, and being perfectly honest, what he did was tame compared to what I would have done if I were in his place. She knew my story from when Mom got a bit too deep into her cups, so she knew damn well there would be no pushing me on this. And besides, accusing your boss of being bloodthirsty was just in poor taste. So she exhaled tiredly and nodded. "Thanks for watching over him. I think I'll go get that sleep now." She hadn't noticed anything about the new implants so far, and I was honestly tempted to keep silent just to see how long it would take. But that was probably a terrible way to build trust. So that idea is thoroughly vetoed. I felt Logos' stare in the back of my head recede. As Gloria stepped out, Rebecca approached me with a conflicted look in her eyes. "Still think we did the right thing there?" "Without a doubt." I nodded and gave her a one-handed hug. It might not help him survive random drive-bys, but knowing where he stands is still a good thing. Spoiled brat had it too good for too long anyway. She snorted before she could stop herself. "Damn, Mike." She laughed. "That's so not cool." "It will be good for him." I shrugged, and before she could distract me again, I shot her a questioning look. "Now, why have you been acting all cagey since coming back? Did something happen?" She went completely still, and I could guess her brain froze for a moment before she chuckled awkwardly. "Dunno what you are talking about, Mikey. I've been great." I just pointed at her. "You didn't shout anything about wanting to kick the animals in the dick yesterday. Something is clearly wrong." She snorted at my bullshit, but seeing me still staring down at her, she turned a bit more serious. "Let's go upstairs. Gonna need a few drinks for this one." Sufficiently intrigued, I followed her up. "So yeah." Becca sighed, rubbing her closed eyes with her palms. "Bro is trying to speedrun, killing himself. Me and Sasha are officially doing our own thing, and Maine is somehow even more of a dick now." "You say that like you always thought he was a dick," I point out wryly, hiding my complete and utter satisfaction with the new development. "Oh, I did." She sits up and chirps. "He was just Nova enough not to get called on it before." Unable to contend with such impeccable logic, I huffed in amusement. We could always just kidnap Pilar and stop his little speed run before it gets too far. He'll bitch and moan for a while, sure, but he'll be alive and coherent enough to do it. I can practically feel how tempted she is by the idea, but she stomps it out a second later, shoulders slumping forward as she shook her head. Can't do him like that. She mutters, he's a dickhead, but he's still my brother. I raised a finger to point out the obvious, but she just smiled sadly and shook her head again. I know, I'll think about it. It's your decision, I agree. Enough of that depressing shit. She claps her hand and sits back up with a slightly forced grin on her face. Think you can find out everything about this Faraday asshole Maine's been hooking up with? Want to flatline him? I ask. The fixer was a corporate climber and would inevitably win the Darwin Award before long, but I wasn't above delivering it personally if it would give Rebecca some peace of mind. The obvious plant in the form of Kiwi meant he had long-term plans for the mercenary group, and the fact said Netrunner just happened to bump into and start mentoring Kushinada told me all I needed to know about the man's ambitions as well. Rebecca shrugs and winks, drawing me out of my brief analysis. It's good to have options. Just warn me before you do something, I say, and reach out for my neck, grabbing the ejected chip between my fingers. Poking someone like that tends to cause a shitstorm whether you want to or not. She reflexively grabs the chip I toss her and blinks. What's this? Everything I could find on the man. She looks down and then back up, and repeats the motion a few times before giving me a suspicious stare. How long did you have this ready? Oh, I don't know. I wonder aloud. About 5-ish months? Give or take a month. She just gapes at me for a good few seconds before snorting, yeah, I'm not even surprised at this point, and then stops in her tracks, her incredulous expression twisting into something diabetes-inducing wide. Did you make sure Maine wasn't going to get you killed? I smirked, duh. She tosses the chip onto the coffee table and promptly glomps me and refuses to let go for a good couple of minutes. Finally, having extricated myself, I gave her a pretend, irritated look. You could actually check it out first before thanking me. She just flicks my head and ignores the pain like a champ. I trust you, Gonk. The response was to be expected, and it still made me look away, which just earned me another giggle. Which is when she finally stood up and inserted the chip, going through it at practiced rapid, but still human, speeds before suddenly glaring death at the wall of text she was seeing. That absolute fucking bitch. She got to Kiwi then. Stopping Becca from going after the Netrunner with guns a-blazing had proven surprisingly simple once I managed to stop her from just blasting out through the window in a berserk, rage-fueled burst of speed. Thankfully, a mix of being uselessly dangled in the air by way of immovable mechadendrite, and the fact she'd actually gotten quite good at controlling her usual impulsiveness in recent months, meant I didn't need to lock her up just so she wouldn't kill her previous crew with her rash actions. And so instead, I had her come up with a proper plan of action in case things went downhill. Because as much as she may be pissed at the fact Kiwi was essentially a spy for their fixer that wasn't exactly against the rules, and going after her for what she might do was just plain pointless. Keeping a watch on both her and the rest of the gonks, though, that much was perfectly reasonable. And I will admit, I was curious to see if Maine could survive his own pig-headedness. Having ensured no one was about to be blown up, I finally managed to get some workshop time in. My inspiration had been delayed so much I was starting to feel blue-brained. I must create. And so after what felt like a blinking haze, I found myself standing in front of my fabrication bench, surrounded on all sides by strings of cybernetic muscle arranged to hang from the ceiling, almost like we were in an actual meat shop. Each string of artificial muscle was made up of a minutely different concentration of my chosen blend of polymers, ceramics, and alloys, and I had been running tests on each and every one of them for the past 6 hours. Tensile strength, endurance, hardness, brittleness, weight-to-power ratios, every single factor was being taken into account by Logos, who was running calculations the entire time. Much as I wanted to immediately take Smasher's advice and alloy the fuck up, doing that without due preparations would have been a band-aid on the issue and not a true solution. Not to mention changing my titanium plating up with some layered reactive armor was so utterly simplistic that contenting myself with just that would have been professionally disappointing. The little string of military-grade Borg musculature I'd purchased off of Mon back in Pacifica was also of great help. My own designs were solid, but the corpos had the advantage of stress-tested experience, and I could already see a few ways to improve the cluster patterns of my future limbs so I could maximize output without too great of a cost to integrity. Naturally, changing up my whole muscle system required an equal upgrade to its support structure, as no matter how resilient my current skeleton was, increasing my physical output several-fold was going to strain the frame a lot. So I already started planning on replacing my bones with an EMP-lined graphene alloy, and the idea of becoming a true tank on legs left me feeling thoroughly giddy. Plans added up on top of plans, and at some point I realized I was pretty much rebuilding my entire frame from ground up, even if I wasn't going to be touching the internal organs at all for the moment. Well, all except one. During my fugue, as I observed an impromptu constructed testing hand rip itself apart under the strain of trying to imitate Smasher's odd vibrating bitch slap that somehow managed to damage my titanium skeleton with a graze, I realized that trying to just tank something like that would take a genuine mainline battle vehicle. Which is how I found myself searching for alternate routes, and soon enough I was drafting up plans to enhance my nanoforge with some extra power and functionality. The ability to rapidly heal minor muscle tearing was as invaluable as always. But why stop myself there if I could make my nanomachines react to physical trauma in real time? The sheer amount of durability I would gain if I managed it was... The idea made me and my digital partner salivate. The project would obviously take way longer than the mere structural upgrades, and I'd likely have to downsize some of my other organs to keep some semblance of humanity to my form. But the idea had already carved itself into my brain, and I wasn't about to let it go without proving without a doubt that it was impractical. And probably not even then. Morning came in what felt like a few minutes, and I only realized it was morning because my audio receptors picked up frustrated steps tapping away above me. In the guest room. Frowning, I looked at the glorious mess I still wasn't done tinkering with, and, "We must take a break," Logos declared. "But," I reached a grasping hand out, "but upgrades. There is work to be done," the traitor reminded. "Continue, and you will require stimulants if you do not wish to make mistakes." The very idea made me shiver in disgust. Point. I grunted and quickly made sure nothing was going to accidentally detonate while I wasn't looking. I tended to get messy when experimenting, so this was a lesson that taught itself multiple times over. Satisfied with no explosive hazard in sight, I went up to get some breakfast before deciding to see if Gloria was willing to get back to work today. She'd probably like the distraction, and I was not eager to face the curious hordes again. But as I approached her doors, I found myself slowing to a halt when I heard what seemed to be another frustrated rant from the tired woman. I felt for her, even if I felt no guilt at being part of the cause of her current frustration. But that wasn't the line of thought that dominated my mind for the moment. Oh no, that honor went to the fact that from what I could pass together, David had somehow managed to get himself robbed on the NCART, get into a chase with said robber, get himself tricked into provoking a few cops, and then running from them on foot like a complete and utter idiot. And the most baffling part of it all, he got away. Was this what they called an idiot savant? 98, Chapter 98, Impetus. Michael Margos Sobranov. So yeah, that about sums it up. Can I count on you to deal with it? I spoke aloud while staring down at my guests. River Ward sighed on the hollow, shooting me a look of annoyance. You know this is the exact kind of thing I want to fight in the Force, right, Michael? And I get that, and I'm truly sorry I have to ask. I reassured him, but admit it, a gonk-ass kid getting into a bit of excitement doesn't even come close to the real issue. Having this kind of thing on record would be a permanent mark. The damages will all be paid for, so all I ask is to let it slide this time. Martinez winced. Also, I stared at my other guest, who was too busy pouting like some street cat. You should focus on chasing the actual perp. All right, fine, you're right. Ward massages the sides of his head. I'll help you out, just don't make this a habit. Thanks, Lieutenant. I owe you one. Right, ward out. The call ended, leaving the freshly closed clinic in an awkward silence. Honestly, if I didn't get a full play-by-play of what happened, I'd have thought this whole debacle was some kind of comedy flick. But no. Somehow, Martinez and Kushinada managed to run into each other while the latter was stealing chips on the NCART. And the former didn't take too kindly to his homework getting clept. And so, high on his recent success, he immediately tried chasing her down. She lost him, unsurprisingly, but not before taking a hard tumble that ended up with her hitting her head pretty hard, which is how she ended up here for a checkup. Just in time to run into Martinez again when Gloria dragged his gonk ass over to beg me to deal with her son getting into legal trouble. He was caught on multiple cameras breaking shit and pushing people around while running away from the NCPD, who'd started chasing the duo after they smashed through a shoe store. Listening to Gloria sound so desperate about something so minor made me all kinds of uncomfortable. I'd have to educate her about her new position soon. This kind of panic was beyond unnecessary. So, Kushinada began, mockingly raising her hand before snapping it back down as my eyes met hers. Instead, she grumpily pointed a thumb at Martinez. He gets pulled out of the fire, but I'm just chopped liver. You are a merc who for some reason decided to resort to petty theft. Deal with it. I deadpan, the implied, and neither are you one of mine, went unsaid. She scoffs and gets up. Can I go then? I'd of course done all necessary maintenance before anything else. I just wave her away. She'd already paid what she owed, and all this was mostly for Martinez's benefit. She grins and twists on the gonk, leaning over and getting into his face. That was fun, Saka boy. We should do it again. Her eyes glow briefly and catch her uploading a harmless data packet to his agent before grinning at Martinez's suddenly very red face, springing back up like a cat that caught the canary and strutting out. David's sputtering catches in his throat as he sees my unimpressed stare, and he manages to calm down relatively quickly, letting out an aggrieved, confused sigh. Not particularly surprising, considering the madwoman just gave him her call ID. Part of me wasn't even surprised at this point. David shakes himself back into reality and meets my eyes. Thanks for that, really. But you'd do it again anyway. His lips twitch a bit and he nods. Yeah. Well, it's not like I disagree with the motive. I shrug. Letting goons get away with robbing you is just asking for it to happen again. The execution, though. I wave my hand as if to say, could use some work. Yeah, I fucked up. No need to rub it in. He scratches the back of his neck and grumbles. I'm sure Gloria has that well in hand, I point out. And he winces, looking away before his expression turned serious. I've been thinking about what you said. About cyberware making us better. How much did she have? I gave him a dry look. I'm not going to disclose patient information, Martinez. Not to you and not to anyone. But she had something, right? He presses. More than nothing. You could say that, yes. I hum non-committally. I'm honestly impressed you managed to keep up for more than a few seconds. I just got lucky, I guess. He shrugs awkwardly and returns back on topic. But I don't want to just be lucky. He hesitates then, but only for a few seconds. Think you can set me up with something? I can do more than something. I say immediately, depending on your tolerance, I could turn you into a walking tank within a day. His eyes brighten in excitement, but I stop him with a raised finger. However, you have no eddies to your name. So before anything, go ask your mother. The rising excitement in his eyes dies a cold and instant death as he directs me with a look of such betrayal, it almost made me regret doing him like this. And then he slumps so hard he practically folds in on himself and mutters, "So not cool, Choom. Free shit is for family only, I'm afraid." I shrug. He groans into his hands. Tossing him a booster shot for his bruising, I send him back upstairs to his understandably worried mother and leave the apartment, heading to the top of the mega building. Your strikes lack conviction, Master Takeda comments as we separate. This was not the case the last time you were here. The old man was as always not even winded, even after minutes of sparring. Say it isn't so, old man. Jugo Fake gasps from next to me. Takeda shoots him a reproachful glare, which only earns a chuckle from the madman. I frown and look down at my purring weapon. It just feels like it isn't enough. Takeda immediately catches the issue. You speak of your brush with death. Yes. I nod. There was no point in playing coy here. I suppose it has left me questioning the point of this. I wave my sword around for emphasis. Many warriors question themselves upon seeing the greater peaks, and you have faced the greatest. Takeda says sagely, and Jugo remains uncharacteristically silent. It is the moment the steel in a warrior's heart tempers or breaks. He assesses me with a quiet look. Tell me, young Michael, have you broken? I don't quite snap at him, but it is a close thing. Of course not. I am just not sure swinging a sword around is going to cut it. Jugo fails to contain a snort. Takeda shoots us both unimpressed looks, and I look away as that was most assuredly not intentional. You are no warrior. The old man informs me bluntly. My head snaps back to him, but I have nothing to say to that, so I just remain silent. You are an engineer, a creator. He elaborates, that is not a bad thing, but it locks you into the singular mindset of always building the perfect tool for the job. If the tool doesn't work, you simply move on to the next one until you have the perfect counter to what you face. So what? I ask, feeling a bit defensive. Should I stop? Of course not, he scoffs, but you should not lean fully into it either. There is merit for building greater weapons, but there is also merit to mastering and refining what you have. Tell me, did your foe use any special tool to overpower you? No. I shake my head, or at least I don't think he did. He raises a curious eyebrow. Quickly replaying the whole thing in my mind, I do my best to describe exactly what happened and how. By the time I'm done, Takeda looks just a tiny bit too smug for my tastes. It seems to me your foe had both superior skill and tools on his side. How quaint. Yes, no need to rub it in. I most assuredly do not grumble. I get it. The amount of damage a mere brush was able to inflict is concerning. He scratches his chin. Smasher is a master of his craft, but in all my years, I've never heard about a skill of such destructive potential. Are you certain it was no cyberware? Pretty sure. I nod. I can't even begin to come up with a way to produce the same effect while keeping things compacted into one dragoon arm. Either Arasaka is far more advanced than even the conspiracy theorists think, or it is all Smasher. I see. Takeda frowns. I will look into this. I incline my head. Thank you, Master Takeda. You are my student, he says as if that answered everything, willful as you are. I look back down to my chainsword and then at the old man as if to ask, should we go again? No. He firmly shakes his head. Think on what we spoke about. Then return here. And not waiting for my response, he turns and begins rearranging the dojo's practice blades, signaling the end of the lesson. I shoot a look at Jugo, and he waves for me to follow him along. He'd called me over earlier to talk about something, but it wasn't so urgent that we needed to skip a bit of sparring first. Of course, Takeda immediately noticed something was off, and I proceeded to get my ass handed to me on a platter by the old man, even more completely than usual. Shame Senko was nowhere to be found, but she had her own turf she'd taken off from one of Shobo's dead goons, and was too busy keeping her hold on that part of Kabuki to hang around H11 all too often. As soon as we step out onto the terrace, he speaks up without preamble. The others are pushing for me to assert control over you. Pardon? I blink. He chuckles, looking off at the distant seaside. The other captains, they see your rise and mock me for letting you off the leash. The idiots want me to drag you fully under the Brotherhood's control. And your boss? I ask, feigning complete calm. He exhales, Nagakawa-sama is staying out of it for now. This could prove problematic. I frown mentally. Could, I remind myself, no need to go into fight or flight over it. And do you agree? Should I be leashed? He barks a laugh and faces me with the usual grin on his face. I may love a good fight, but I'm not an idiot. The only reason the fools in Japantown want me to force you into the fold is so I could kill myself trying. So what you are saying, I trail off briefly, is that we should poke them back. He claps his hands. Ha! I'd love to see the looks on their fat faces when we beat them all half to death. He shakes his head and sobers a bit. But no, That would be too close to betraying the Brotherhood for an outsider. So what's this then? A warning, he corrects. Once they grow tired of my lack of response, they will try provoking you directly, try to make you think I'm the one at fault and make us fight that way. They don't really think that would work, I ask incredulously. Do they? They are afraid. Jugo shrugs. Being a Fullborg already made you a target, but after they saw what you did in Zurich, they are starting to take your refusal to join as a direct threat. I was outside the center of their power, which means someone was pushing this specifically, something to investigate. And Wakako had nothing to say about that. I frown. Car-san is a fixer. He points out, she deals with edge runners, the hired muscle. Do you really think anyone is going to treat you that way once you start amassing real power? That is not untrue. I conclude after only a bit of thinking. I could always use my connection to Arasaka to make them back off. But the more intelligent ones will be able to see that from my out-in-the-open deal with Yorinobu anyway, and the rest just won't care, so announcing it for all to hear would be a waste. Or, I stop myself, I just pay Wakako to deal with it. It wouldn't be the first or last time she smacked the tigers down for making too many waves against profitable business partners. What do you suggest then? I ask after an objective second, satisfied with having multiple ways out of it. Just stay on my guard and put them down as they come. No. He denies me immediately. If you simply face them as they come sooner or later, my inaction will become too suspect. They will have enough reason to petition the head to order me to fight you. A grin starts spreading on his face, then what you must do instead is become so unassailable and so quickly that they will not even dare to try and touch you. I am already planning on that, I point out dryly. Do it faster. He says immediately, build your forces, fortify your positions, display your strength. He points at me. The more powerful you seem, the less certain they will feel. And then, he spreads his arms jubilantly, they will crawl back to me so they can feast on what little scraps you are still willing to offer us. A beat passes before I make a single incredulous blink. Whose side are you even on here? My own, he grins widely, and a bet on Margos is a bet on Jugo. This, of course, leaves me completely speechless. Goddamn madman. But that's enough of the boring stuff. He somehow envelops my shoulder, despite me having a good 2 feet on him, and starts dragging me back in. There is sake to be had, and the boys want to hear about your adventure with the Swiss. Of course they did. Thankfully, I managed to extricate myself from Jugo's Jugo-ness after only a bit, mostly thanks to Miss Akari dragging him off by the ear because he had a meeting scheduled with his in-laws that he was trying to avoid. My return home was relatively quiet, leaving me to stew in my thoughts on both what Takeda and Jugo had told me, and surprisingly I wasn't tempted to just sink into overthink like I tended to in most such situations. Probably because I'd already considered all of it, and I just needed things pointed out to me like the usual gonk to kick me into gear. Takeda was right. My path to self-improvement needed to be holistic, and not just focused on making the perfect tool for everything. Jugo was right as well. I was already stirring the pot and needed to display my power before challenges invited themselves. I needed to do more and start doing it quickly, and as always, the first step was the ability to commit more violence than those who wanted to bring me down. And it just so happened Vic said he had veterans looking for honest work. 99, Chapter 99, Recruitment. Michael Margot Sobranov. Hey, Misty. I waved as I ducked into Misty's esoterica, earning an immediate beaming smile from the woman, while her young customer looked up from the stack of artificial incense she'd just finished paying for with a mix of awe and terror in her eyes. My, Misty goes to greet me but pauses, shooting a look at her customer she corrects to, Magos, here to see the doctor? The customer gulps, get out of your hair if you need me to. Relax, Tatiana. Misty pats her shoulder gently. He's just passing through. She ignores my apologetic look and waves me through. Vic said they are all here. You arrived just on time. Thanks, Misty. I bob my head. I'll leave you to whatever it is you two were doing. Her customer shrinks on herself as I pass them by. But as I leave, my audio receptors catch the duo resuming their conversation about cursing an unfaithful boyfriend. The fact I'd seen Misty be pretty spot on with her kung fu bullshit previously made that far scarier than it had any right being, and I walked away just a tiny bit faster. Vic's clinic looked as humble as ever, but there were no patients downstairs this time, and instead the scene I walked in on was the Ripperdoc practice boxing with a thoroughly sun-withered man sporting some of the cheapest replacement limbs on the market. And the older man was still holding his own despite it. To their side, I spotted only one more. He was younger than both Vic and the old man, but still much older than I was, and his eyes were on me from the moment I walked in, and his sole arm was set over an old revolver in his lap. The fact he was sat on a wheelchair and that the arm was the only limb he had made the image far less threatening than it was pitiable. "Oof," the old man grunted as Vic snaked a jab through his guard. "Damn these old bones, you still hit like a truck, Vic." "Sure thing, old-timer," the Ripper chuckles. "Best take a seat before you pop your hip, though." "Oh, fuck off." He rolls his eyes and shoves Vic's shoulder. Their jovial talk is cut off as the wheelchair-bound man clears his throat, drawing their attention to me. Vic smiles in greeting, but the old man's reaction is much more telling, as he immediately takes a stance without even thinking about it, minimizing the surface area I could aim for while getting as low to the ground as possible. I pause and refrain from raising my arms. Knife hands wouldn't be as much of a peaceful sign as I'd hope at the moment. He blinks and catches himself doing it, eyeing me suspiciously for a moment before addressing Vic, still not even letting himself blink as he did. "You call us over to get turned into chow, Vic? Is this about the fucking bet again?" Victor just chuckles at that. "Who'd want to eat you, Mason?" "Right, fuck you." The old man grunts and then addresses me. "So, you just going to keep standing there or what?" "I don't know." I hum, "Do you plan to keep pissing yourself for too much longer? I can turn my nose off, but it's sort of the principle of the thing." His eyes narrow for a moment before he barks out a short, rasped laugh. "You're all right." The other man doesn't react, save for a slight loosening of the tension around his eyes. "So this is the one you've been talking up, eh, Vic?" Mason asks, as I walk up to them. "When you said he was borged out, I thought you were talking about some Corpo Gemini reject. Not whatever this is. He may look intimidating, but trust me, you will want to hear him out." Vic says simply. "Well, if he's got your vote of confidence." Mason grunts and offers his hand to me with only a split second of hesitation. Mason Smith. He twitches his head in the direction of the wheelchair-bound man. "That's my brat, Wesson." I go to introduce myself, but then catch something, suddenly pausing and directing the man with the driest look I could manage. The old man thought he was being funny back then. Wesson speaks up, his rough voice a mix of annoyance and resignation. I say he was just drunk out of his mind. "Kakeke." Mason cackles. "I've had a fun life." "Too fun," his son grunts. Deciding to just move on from this idiocy, I return the handshake, "Michael Sobranov." Being forthright with people like these seemed the best policy. There is only two of you. There is plenty more of us out there. Mason retracts his hand, eyeing my fingers warily before looking me back in the eyes without any actual fear. They just trust the two of us to speak for them. So the entire negotiation hinges on just them. That should make things simple. I nod as the man takes his seat, while Vic goes to grab some drinks for us, shooting me an encouraging wink as he leaves. "We might as well skip to the core of things. Care to share your resume?" He grunts and begins listing. "Ran with Lazarus during the Corpo Wars. Worked for the military police during the Red. Tried getting into security for a while, but then the NUSA tried conquering our shit, so we went and joined the NC volunteer force sent for Texas. They even kitted us out with military-grade cyberware for it." As soon as he started talking about the Ruinification War, his breathing grew a bit heavier. Not to the point of hyperventilation, but he was obviously having difficulty simply talking about it, despite his attempts to not show it, which is when Wesson bumped his shoulder and spoke up instead. Our mission was a failure, not that we had much of a chance to begin with. We returned home just as Arasaka was landing, and the government decided there was no longer any need for us to keep their military assets. "They stripped you of your chrome?" I ask, unsurprised but somehow still disappointed. Mason grunts while Wesson simply nods. They had deactivation codes for the implants. We couldn't even fight back. Bastard fuckers had the guts to offer us pensions for our service. Mason grinds out before spitting to the side, gave us ennies and sent us on our way. Many of us couldn't even walk back then. Well, while that is tragic, I could probably find something similar whenever I went in this damned city. I thought cynically, what do you bring to the table? Wesson's eyes narrow, but Mason just grins and lets out a quiet cackle. You're not here for our sob story, fair enough. I'll give it to you simple. We were mercs before this whole edge-running nonsense took over. We fought in wars, took on suicide missions, and we are still alive. He shoots me a challenging look. That good enough for you, Tin Man? No. I deadpan and immediately begin hacking through all of the data available on them, Logos doing much the same at far greater speeds. A few objective seconds passed before we were done, and I could already see Mason was halfway through, standing up in anger, while his son tried pulling him back, but failed due to a lack of leverage. But the net does have quite a bit on your outfit's previous work, I say, just as calmly as ever. And I have to say, what I found is impressive. The old man stops in his tracks, his face shifting through a few expressions before settling on begrudging respect. Where'd you meet this scary fucker, Vic? The Ripper, who had rejoined us in the meantime, smirks and says nothing. Mason grunts and focuses back on me. So what kind of job did you need a bunch of down-on-their-luck mercs for? How much did Vic share exactly? I ask instead. Said we should meet. Claimed you were our chance for a better life. The old man shrugs. I give Vic a questioning glance, to which he shrugs. Mason likes judging things on his own. Trust but verify. I nod to myself in agreement. Very well, as I've said, I'm Michael Sobranov, though Night City is far more familiar with my other name, Magos. Mason shows no reaction, but Wesson's eyes narrow. You heard about this one, kid? Mason asks, catching the look instantly. Yes, the wheelchair-bound veteran says as he leans forward, big-time merc. They say he fought Smasher and lived. Mason's eyes widen as he turns back to me. As I keep telling people, fought is putting things very generously. But discussing my merc career is not the point of this meeting and can wait. True enough. Mason grunts after a moment. I'll make this as simple as possible. I said after a moment, I'm starting a cybernetics corp, and I need guards and troopers for when someone tries to destroy what I'm planning to build. A group of veterans more than fits the bill. How'd a merc start a ware company? Mason asks. I'm a Ripper first, Butcher second. Seeing him slowly start to eye my frame, I add, I'm also not some corpo reject trying to start a new life. Everything I have built with my own hands, up to and including myself. That should tell you more than enough. The old man whistles, eyebrows rising so far they disappeared in his hairline. Guess I can see where you got the balls to try taking a bite out of NC. A bit suicidal, but I can respect it. He pauses. Got something a bit more tangible to show my folks? Nodding, I reach for a small plastic case in my coat pocket and toss it over to him. He catches the chip case easily and inserts it into his port without too much suspicion. My earlier display made it clear I could do whatever I wanted to either of them, and they did seem to trust Vic enough to come in the first place. Once more I see his eyebrows disappear as he lets out a low whistle. That's definitely an offer and a half right there. He takes the chip out and offers it to his son, trying to buy our loyalty all proper like, "Heh? You are selling me your experience." I shrug, and I'm selling you your dignity. His face sours, but he grunts in agreement a moment later. My offer was more than fair, just as I preferred. Good pay, a place to stay for both guards and their families in the tower. The security risks made it necessary, in-house healthcare, for issues both on and off the job, and a series of military implants of the Legionary series I've been developing in the background, or Centurion, which just let them have a lot more personalization in what they could use, in the case of the officers, and assurance to replace it all with perfectly serviceable civilian limbs if they ever decided to leave my employ. There was a clause in there letting them buy the military cyberware at a discount depending on the duration of their service, but most people tended to find combat cyberware too heavy on the nervous system for casual use And the fear of going cyber psycho only reinforced that, so I suspected only a few would take that offer. This deal is solid, Wesson says after reading through the contract, and his eyes narrow, almost too solid. I'm not some soulless husk, I inform him. Unlike my future peers, I like to still consider the people working under me to be actual people, and that demands I ensure they can live their lives with dignity so long as they are under my umbrella. Big words, he says, but notably doesn't speak against it. Looking at the chrome fiend, he might just be able to back them up. Mason grins. I'll bring your offer to the boys, and I'll tell Vic what they decide. He shares a quick look with his son, and then a tiny, barely perceptible nod. But I'll say it right now, the two of us will be taking you up on it. Oh? I blink. The man may have given me the impression of being a bit lackadaisical, but he didn't strike me as someone who didn't think things over. I'm tired of hearing my limbs creaking even when I sleep. Mason shrugs and points a thumb at Vic. The doc does great work, but he isn't running a charity, and my boy deserves to run again. Wesson keeps his face completely blank. So yeah, we'll be taking your offer. Mason repeats, and if I'm not too senile yet, another 200 or so boys too. 200 was perfect for what I wanted, even if any sort of large-scale conflict would demand future expansion. For a moment I found myself considering klepping some maelstromers to use as shock troops, but no. Just no. Excellent. I grin a bit too widely as I made myself move on from that line of thinking, making the man pale just a bit. Happy to have you on board. We share a few more words before the old vet wheels his son out, leaving me alone with Vic. Think I did good back there? I ask him. You did great, kid. Vic smiles. Mason may have let the mind fog get him a bit too much, but he is still one of the best in the city. You impressed him. A bit simple to impress someone when you tower over them. I huff. Vic shakes his head wryly. The fact you didn't lord it over him for even a moment is what did it for him. He came here expecting someone to buy him a few more years of scraping by. You offered him a new life. He won't forget that. Let us hope so, I said, feeling equally satisfied and troubled. The more people I brought in, the more inevitable betrayal became, as betrayal could only come from one's allies. How would I react then? The thought left me uneasy. What's got you thinking? Vic asks, tossing me a canned beer. Catching the can and chewing it down without even popping it open, I shake my head. Just over worrying about the future. The usual, really. Anything I can help with? He asks. It will work itself out. I wave the offer off. You just keep yourself ready for when it's time to move. Yes, no need to keep reminding me. He chuckles good-naturedly before looking his clinic over. I'll miss this dusty place. It definitely has history, I mutter in agreement. Honestly, I might just pay Misty to keep it open so we have somewhere to run off to if the need strikes. Vic gives me an odd look. I can't ask you to do that. You don't have to, I say, absently laying my hand on the old ripper chair, my voice lowering into a near-inaudible whisper. This place is where I got my hope back after all. Vic didn't catch it, though, because he was already moving over to the empty space he'd been sparing in when I came in. Whenever I think too much, I find swinging it out clears the head perfectly well. He waves for me to join him. Got bored of beating the elderly and moving on to the youth, Vic, I quip as I move to join him. He takes a boxing stance and realizes his mistake as he sees my hand clench into a fist. His expression scrunches up and he exhales. Just watch the face. 100. Chapter 100. Taking Off. Michael Magos Sobranov. It didn't take long for the two veterans to get back to me, and within 2 days they informed me that the rest of their colleagues had agreed to provisionally accept my offer, being actually smart about the whole thing and demanding more details than I'd provided previously before going all in. I didn't mind it and shared what extra details I reasonably could without them being under contract, and soon enough I was meeting with another dozen representatives from the veteran community and shaking their hands. Interestingly, a number of them seemed to heavily focus on the fact I was a Fullborg, and that I hinted at Mason I could make others the same, some of them going as far as to look almost proud of the fact they were signing on with me. I'd failed to consider just how prestigious having access to full-body conversions really was. having somewhat understandably taken the tech for granted after I managed it myself. It was a sign of power and reach, and the older veterans understood that very well. It offered far more leverage than just another product, and I would make sure to use it to my advantage now that I was reminded of the fact. Especially when I designed my own Warborg models, and hopefully ones that wouldn't brain fry their user after only a few months of operation. But that would have to wait until I had actual production lines set up. 3D printing was all right when putting together smaller, non-too sensitive components, but even my own plating was mostly salvaged from actual forged metals and reinforced with nanites, so anything larger would take proper facilities. And speaking of facilities, recruitment of the civilian variety was slowly picking up as well. The rumor was mostly spread through Old Chew and my other old customers to begin with, and through word of mouth from there on, and it was more than enough for the hundreds of residents I shared a floor with to start asking around with an almost feverish interest. Feeling just a bit petty about the headache he caused me, I conscripted David into dealing with that whole mess in his free time, an action that made Gloria beam at me with far too much enthusiasm, and the Academy kid did a surprisingly good job acting as the temporary local rep for my company. He got to earn a couple hundred quick eddies doing actual work, and the locals of H11, Floor 16 were informed about everything they needed to know about their chance at a future. It was a win for everyone, and doubly so for me. Haven't even announced recruitment officially yet, and I already had just under 400 workers signing up. Successful as that was, I knew it was never going to be sustainable, which is how I found myself in a private booth in one FOH11's more respectable restaurants in my more fleshy guise of Michael, interviewing a classically pretty Asian woman for the position of public relations representative over some tea. Which is why I believe presenting a safe, approachable front would be the best strategy for your company. She finished her minutes-long spiel with practiced efficiency. Showing no outward reaction, I hummed in consideration. Everything she'd said were things I had considered on and off for a while now, but all of it felt too sanitized. Dead, for the lack of a better word. Too corporate. And how I appreciated the irony of that conclusion. The initial meeting went well enough, but after having sat through the most rehearsed thing in my life, I just couldn't find it in myself to be in any way enthusiastic about what she brought to the table, even if I knew it was valid. Doing my utmost not to sigh, I nodded. You make good points, Ms. Akiko. I will be sure to contact you about my decision soon. She smiled a perfectly proportioned smile, just wide enough to be friendly, but not too friendly, and walked out. At least she wasn't an idiot, if her micro-expressions were any indication, but even then I'd already marked her down for a lower position if I ended up recruiting her at all. Reminding myself that not every meeting was going to go perfectly, I sent the notification out for the next candidate to step inside. Immediately, the first thing I noticed was just how bulky the Latino man was. Walking fridge would not be an unfitting descriptor for the sheer unit of a man before me, and the slightly darker-hued Valentino coloring of his clothes, accompanied by the usual Santa Muerte iconography of the popular Christian cult among the residents of Haywood, only served to make him a more imposing sight. His face was square, notably dominated a mostly cybernetic jawline, and a single Gene 2 eye that looked much like Ward's if a bit more advanced, and each of his visible limbs had some sort of work done to it. Good choices too, those models play together pretty well. I thought absently as I observed, but the most notable features of all were his genuine, honest grin on his face as he walked in, seeming to almost radiate the man's own cheer into the air around him, and the chrome-colored cross hanging off his neck. He certainly had a presence, was the long and short of my opinion of one Father Hernan Guadalajara. Mr. Guadalajara, thank you for coming. I nodded as he entered. Please, just Hernan. He spoke in a cheerful yet deep tone. Any friend of Jack's is a friend of mine. A sentiment I can get behind. Call me Michael, then. My lip twitched upwards. I could do casual, please, have a seat. Thank you. He took the offered seat and smiled as I waved at the menu, indicating he could order whatever he wanted. No point in making this whole experience a complete waste of time for those who didn't make the cut. Soon enough, the server came in with the tequila and soda, refilling my own tea before leaving us back to it. So, Hernan, I spoke up after a bit, making myself comfortable in my seat. Jackie tells me you have a way with people, something I will be in great need of in the near future, as you well know. His eyes shine with amusement at my phrasing. They like to make it seem like it is something beyond them, but I just helped anyone who has enough faith to ask for it. He shrugs as if that really was that. It made the people gather around me for a while, but we were a small congregation at the end of the day. No church to take care of? I asked. Those cost money. He smiled wryly, looking almost sad for a moment, and we were not rich. Leaning back in my seat, I give him a slow once-over, which is why I hear you joined the Valentinos. I make no secret of it. He nods seriously. My flock needed help, and all I had to provide for them was the strength of my arms. We managed for a couple of years, and most of them have made a brighter life for themselves, but I have a wife now and a child on the way. The life of danger is no longer for me. And your departure from the Valentinos was done by the book? I asked. I have paid my dues to the authors. He reassures me they were sad to see me go, but respected my choice. Very well. I tap my cup absently. So long as your past doesn't make problems for me, we are all good. He exhales just a bit too hard, signaling his relief. He wasn't too relaxed then. Good. But that's enough about that. I speak up after a moment. You've already been informed about the outline of what I'm looking to build, and Jackie gave you the job info as well, so we can skip that. You wouldn't be here if you weren't interested. What I want to hear from you is how I should present myself to the world. He perks up at this. Seeing him waiting, I add, what should my company present itself as? Instead of answering immediately, he meets my eyes for a long drawn-out moment and weighs his words before speaking with conviction. Jackie tells me you are a man truly devoted to his craft, that you speak of it with fervor and belief, with passion for what you do. Not incorrect. I nod slowly and wave for him to move on. Lean into this. He tells me decisively, the other corpos are stale, boring, their humanity stripped to the barest possible minimum. There is no rule stating that following their soulless behavior is the only way to go. Be bold and be forward, and the people will love you for it. Just be honest. I quirk an eyebrow. Is that it? You would be surprised just how far a bit of honesty can take you. He grins. The people want authenticity, they want passion, and from all I hear. He spreads his arms. You have both in spades. And if my beliefs stray from yours, I address the final point of contention, then what? Jackie tells me that your heart is good, chrome or no chrome. He doesn't hesitate for even a second, meeting my eyes directly. Is he a liar? A beat passes before I give the only valid answer to that question. No. Then that is enough. Hernan smiles. Yes, it most certainly is. I chuckle lightly. Now say I hypothetically accept your proposal. Tell me more about just how deeply I should lean into my presentation. We began discussing the bones of a plan, and just as advertised, the man knew what he was talking about, at least as far as the common customer went, if not the investor. Something I currently had no need to worry about, nor something I'd consider for a long time. Much as I kept my tone neutral and my words undecided, both he and I knew I'd reached my decision by the second hour and fourth round of drinks. So how was he? Jackie Wells poked my side with an elbow. Eh? Come on, Jack. I chuckle, ignoring the jabs as I drove up to the Petrochem Dam. I can't be spreading potential employee information around like that. That would be unprofessional. So he got the job, he asks with a grin. Rolling my eyes, I sigh. Yes, Jack, he got the job. Ha, he laughs. Told you the old Wells charm is never wrong. Rebecca snorts from the back of the van. Yes, we are all in awe. I drone dryly. We all chuckle. So, Mikey, my girlfriend calls after a moment. What's this surprise you got us all buttered up for? Wouldn't be much of a surprise if I told you, would it? I ask teasingly. Come on. She pretend whines. The suspense is killing me. I shake my head wryly. We are almost there. Just have some patience. I promise you'll love it. A minute or so later, we climb up the dam and reach the overlook where Muammar Reyes, or El Capitan as he prefers, conducts his business. Terrible choices in haircuts aside, the man was the greatest smuggler in Night City. He meets us all in the shade of a large truck, carrying an equally imposing cargo crate, with a satisfied smile on his face. Margos, told you El Capitan's got you covered. Never doubted you for a moment, Cap. I chuckle. He and Jackie share a more cheerful greeting, low high-fiving and bumping their shoulders like old friends, and then his eyes land on Rebecca. And if it isn't Wakako's newest terror, he says with a grin, hope the granny isn't too shy about sending you my way from time to time. Could always use more scav cleaners. She likes to grumble, but she won't mind. Becca stage whispers with a conspiratorial wink. But that can wait. Tell me what you got us. He shoots me a look to which I just shrug, making him chuckle as he waves for us to follow. As the good lady commands, El Capitan will provide. He leads us behind the truck, where we are met with a pair of nomads. Though none I recognize, he waves at the duo and then points a thumb my way. Mitch, Scorpion, this is the client I've been telling you about. This isn't standard protocol. I point out to the fixer, but still nod in greeting at the duo. You know I like to make the best deals, Margos. Cap shrugs my suspicion off, raising his hand so I'd let him explain. Heard you got in good with some of the nomads, and I thought why not ask around? See what I can scrounge up. We hashed out a pretty good deal. All they asked for it was to meet with you. I see, I say neutrally, eyeing the duo and finding nothing too suspicious. No point dancing around it. Heard about you from Zeke Jodes. It's why the technomancers even bothered setting that beauty up. The older nomad speaks up while pointing at the cargo box. He had a lot to say, thought I'd see with my own eyes. I was in my Magos look at the moment, so all I did by way of expression was whirl my trio of sensors. And? Satisfied with what you've found? He said you were a magic hand with fixing people and that you are trustworthy. Mitch says while looking me up and down before seemingly coming to a decision. The Aldecaldo's plan on moving in around Night City in a few months. I was wondering if we could set up some kind of deal for keeping our people in one piece. Not confident in your own rippers, I probe. He shrugs. They're good in a pinch, but they aren't pros. I hum in understanding and cup my chin. It is an interesting proposal, I say after a few seconds of consideration, though things have changed a lot since the Jodes left. But depending on what your family has to offer, I can see myself offering you a good deal. What are you looking for? He asks simply. Raw materials for the most part, some harder to get components, that sort of thing. I wave my hand about. I could get most of those things myself, but it never hurt to get things for cheap when possible. Give me your leader's contacts and I'll negotiate the specifics with them before you get moving. Might as well make your move nice and profitable for all of us. Saul will love hearing that. Scorpion chuckles. He sure will. Mitch nods with a small smirk, and I see his eyes light up as he sends me the requested information. A moment later, he claps his hands and steps away from the truck. Well, that's good enough for me. Let's get this show on the road. Scorpion nods and hops onto the back of the truck, starting the process of dismantling the cargo box without snapping any hinges. As I was saying, Muammar takes over again. El Capitan always got you covered. I got receipts, a paper trail, everything. He grins. City Hall won't be able to complain about a thing. I even got the bad girl all nice and fueled up for a test ride. Just as he says that, the box rings out with one final click before folding apart and revealing a shiny brand new black Aerodyne vehicle, easily large enough to hold my van in its cargo hold with room left over, and with 6 massive thrusters larger than my frame to keep it in the air. It even had the pair of front-mounted rocket launchers I requested. A quick scan revealed the Nomad technicians did an excellent job scrubbing the parts off of any unnecessary software, and even the OS seemed to have received a touch-up in efficiency on the way. I definitely had to meet these technomancers in the future. Their work was inspired. Before I could so much as open my mouth to praise the results, however, I noticed Rebecca vibrating in place, looking like she was about to bolt. "Becca, no," I said almost desperately, but she was already moving, launching herself forward into an enhanced sprint with a cry of dibs on her lips. "Get back here, you gremlin." I bolted after her, leaving the quartet behind us to laugh their asses off.